The acrid smoke of Azagon Prime's lower markets burned Cale Mercer's nostrils as he pushed through the crowded bazaar. 5 years stranded on this industrial hellhole had dulled his senses to the worst stenches. But today the air carried an extra layer of chemical tang that made his eyes water. Another factory explosion in the upper rings, no doubt. Fresh earth imports, genuine Terra artifacts. A 6-armed vendor waved tentacles at him from behind a stall of obvious counterfeits. "For you, Earthman, special price." Cale kept his head down. 5 years since his military transport had been shot down over this backwater world. And still, the locals could spot an Earthling from 50 paces. Something about the way he walked, they said. Too much tension in the shoulders, too much wariness in the eyes. He tugged his hood lower, hiding the scar that ran from his left temple to his jaw, a parting gift from the crash that had killed his entire squad. Everyone except him. The memory triggered the familiar burn of bile in his throat. Survivor's guilt. That's what the automated psych droid at the refugee processing center had called it, before declaring him adequately functional and sending him off with a handful of local currency and directions to the labor district. 5 years later, adequately functional was still the perfect description for his existence. Work odd jobs. Fight when necessary. Survive until tomorrow. Repeat. "Help, please, somebody help." The cry cut through the market's cacophony. A child's voice, high with terror. Kyle's head snapped up, military instincts kicking in before conscious thought could intervene. Through gaps in the crowd, he spotted the source. A small girl, no more than 8 or 9 by Earth standards, though with the violet-tinged skin of one of the humanoid subspecies that populated this sector. 3 men in the black leather jackets of the Razor Gang had her cornered against a waste disposal unit. "Your father's payment is late again, little one," the largest thug said, his voice carrying over the suddenly quieter marketplace. Nobody intervened. Nobody ever did on Azagon Prime. "He's sick. He just needs more time," the girl pleaded, her small hands clutching a package to her chest. "I have medicine for him." The thug reached for the package. "This'll cover half his debt." Cale was moving before he'd made a conscious decision. 5 steps brought him within range, and with practiced ease, he grabbed the thug's outstretched arm and twisted, using the man's own momentum to send him crashing into a nearby stall. "The kid said her father's sick," Kyle said quietly. "Walk away." The other 2 thugs stared at him in surprise before recognition dawned on their faces. "The Earthling," the shorter one hissed. "The one from the fighting pits." Cale's reputation in the underground fighting circuit wasn't extensive, but it was enough to make the thugs hesitate. In the pits, he fought for meal money and lodging credits. It wasn't glamorous, but it kept him alive. The large thug untangled himself from the collapsed stall, face contorted with rage. "You've made a mistake, off-worlder." "Wouldn't be my first," Kyle replied, shifting his stance to place himself between the girl and the gang members. What happened next was a blur of practiced movements. The first thug lunged with a vibro knife, the weapon's edge humming with energy. Kyle stepped inside the attack, trapped the arm, and delivered a sharp strike to the elbow joint. The crack of breaking bone echoed through the suddenly silent marketplace, followed by the thug's howl of pain. The second attacker was smarter, maintaining distance while pulling a compact pulse pistol from his jacket. Illegal on this level of the city, but laws were flexible concepts on Azagon Prime. Cale dropped low, sweeping the legs of the first thug as he fell. The man toppled into his armed companion, sending the energy pulse wide into a stack of cargo crates. The resulting explosion sent spectators scrambling. In the chaos, the third thug, the leader, circled behind Cale, a neural disruptor rod extending from his sleeve. Kale caught the movement in his peripheral vision and pivoted, but not quite fast enough. The rod grazed his shoulder, sending waves of paralyzing pain down his left side. Gritting his teeth against the agony, Kale drove forward, his right hand forming a tight fist that connected with the thug's throat. The man stumbled back, gasping for air, neural rod forgotten as he clutched at his crushed windpipe. The second thug had recovered his footing and aimed the pulse pistol again. Kale's left arm hung uselessly at his side, but his legs still worked. He launched himself in a diving tackle, catching the armed man at waist level and driving him into the dirty permacrete. The pistol skittered away, and Kale delivered 2 sharp blows to the man's temple, leaving him unconscious. Rising to his feet, Kale turned to face the final opponent, only to find the large thug had retreated, dragging his gasping leader with him. "This isn't over, Earthling," he shouted over his shoulder as they disappeared into the crowd. The marketplace remained eerily silent as Kale caught his breath. His left arm was regaining sensation, pins and needles replacing the numbing pain of the disruptor. "Are you okay?" he asked, turning to the girl who remained pressed against the waist unit, wide-eyed. She nodded, clutching her package tighter. "Thank you," she whispered. "My name's Rin." Kale managed a small smile. "Let's get you home. Rin, where does your father—" "Oh, well, what a spectacle," a booming voice interrupted as a heavy-set man in expensive synthetic silks pushed through the dispersing crowd. Kale recognized him immediately. Vargas, one of the pit fight promoters from the upper levels. "I came down to find new blood for the arena, and what do I see? The quiet earthling from the lower pits, fighting like a Teleucian war beast." Vargas clapped his meaty hands together in delight. "And without tech gloves or enhancements, pure raw skill." Kale's stomach sank. He'd worked hard to stay in the minor fighting circuits, away from the spotlight of the major arenas. The underground pits paid enough to survive and drew little attention. Exactly what a former Earth Alliance officer with a price on his head needed. "Not interested, Vargas," Kale said flatly. "I was just helping the kid." Vargas's smile didn't falter. "Oh, but you misunderstand. This isn't an invitation." He snapped his fingers, and 4 security drones hummed into view, their weapons ports open and glowing. "The Star Sector Championship begins tomorrow, and I've just found my wild card entry." I said I'm not. "The Razor Gang doesn't forget faces," Vargas interrupted, nodding toward the direction the thugs had fled. "Their boss, Kovac, owns half the officials in this district. By nightfall, you'll have a price on your head." He spread his hands. "Or you can come with me. Fight in the championship under my sponsorship. The prize purse is enough to get off-world, maybe even back to your precious Earth." Kale's jaw tightened. A trap, disguised as an opportunity. But Vargas wasn't wrong about the Razors. They'd hunt him through every level of this wretched city. "What about the girl?" he asked. Vargas waved dismissively. "Consider her debt settled. A signing bonus, shall we say?" Rin looked up at Kale, her eyes wide. "You don't have to." "It's okay," Kyle said softly. "Go home to your father." The girl hesitated, then pressed something into his hand, a small carved wooden charm on a leather cord. "For luck," she whispered before darting away through the crowd. Kale watched her go, then turned back to Vargas with resignation. "When's the first fight?" Vargas's smile widened. "That's the spirit. You'll need a proper name for the arena, of course. Something catchy." He tapped his chin. "How about the bare-handed Earthling?" Kale slipped Rin's charm around his neck. "Just Kale will do." The preparation area beneath the grand arena of Azagon Prime stank of disinfectant, sweat, and fear. Fighters from a dozen different species paced in their assigned cubicles or sat in meditation, each preparing in their own way for the brutality to come. Kale stood motionless as a technician attempted to fit him with regulation tech gloves, flexible exoskeletons that covered the hands and forearms, supposedly equalizing strength differences between species while measuring impact force for the betting algorithms. These are mandatory, the blue-skinned tech explained for the third time, frustration evident in her voice. All competitors must wear standard equipment. They'll slow me down, Kyle replied, also for the third time. I don't use enhancements. It's not an enhancement. It's regulatory equipment, she insisted. Without them, the neural interfaces can't track your performance metrics for the audience feeds. Kale flexed his scarred knuckles. Not my problem. The technician threw up her forearms in exasperation. Fine, get disqualified for all I care. As she stomped away, Vargas slipped into the preparation cubicle, his face flushed with anger. What's this nonsense about refusing the tech gloves? Are you trying to get yourself killed out there? Your first opponent is a Dracian mercenary, twice your strength and with natural armor. Kale continued wrapping his hands with simple cloth strips. The gloves restrict movement. I fight better without them. You'll fight dead without them, Vargas hissed. This isn't some back-alley pit fight. These are professional killers and career champions. Then why did you bring me here? Kyle asked quietly. Vargas's expression shifted, calculation replacing anger. Because you're different, an unknown variable. The betting odds against you are astronomical, which means... He trailed off with a meaningful look. Which means you've bet on me to lose, Kale finished. And if I win instead? Vargas's smile returned. Then I'll be very surprised and still quite wealthy, as I've hedged my bets. He leaned closer. But don't get ambitious. Survive the first round. Make it look good. Then take a dive in the second. I'll still arrange your safe passage off-world. A chime sounded throughout the preparation area, signaling the 5-minute warning before the first matches. You think about it, Vargas said, backing toward the exit. There's no shame in strategic loss when surrounded by superior opponents. Left alone. Kyle finished wrapping his hands and checked his reflection in the polished metal surface of the wall. The face that stared back was leaner than the Alliance officer he'd once been, with new scars and a perpetual shadow of stubble. His eyes, though, they were the same, haunted by the memory of his squad's screams as their transport burned around them. Captain Lena Vasquez, Lieutenant Sam Rodriguez, Flight Officer Tara Chen, Technical Sergeant Mark Lee, Intelligence Officer David Park. All dead because their mission to deliver diplomatic documents had threatened someone's agenda. Someone connected to the Omnicore Corporation, if his 5 years of careful investigation had yielded accurate results. Someone possibly connected to this very tournament. Kale touched the wooden charm Rin had given him. Sometimes the path to revenge appeared when least expected. The final chime sounded, it was time. The roar of the crowd hit Kale like a physical force as he stepped into the arena. Thousands of spectators filled the tiered seating that rose in a perfect circle around the combat floor, their combined voices creating a wall of sound that reverberated in his chest. The combat surface itself was a surprise, not the expected metal or synthetic material, but actual sand. Coarse and rusty red, it shifted beneath his boots as he walked to his designated starting position. A primitive touch for a high-tech spectacle. Across the 60-foot diameter circle, his opponent emerged from the opposite entrance. The Dracian stood nearly 7 feet tall, his reptilian body covered in natural armor plates that gleamed under the harsh arena lights. Unlike Kale, he wore the regulation tech gloves, the machinery extending up his massive forearms and pulsing with power indicators. The announcer's voice boomed over the din. For our opening match, we have a last-minute wildcard entry from the distant planet Earth, with no professional record and... A pause, followed by confusion in the voice. Apparently no tech enhancements or regulation gear. Kyle Bare Hands Mercer. The crowd's response was a mixture of laughter and derisive calls. Betting terminals around the arena flashed with rapidly dropping odds on Kale's survival. Facing him with 15 professional kills and current champion of the Outer Rim circuit, Drax the Skinner Voth. The Dracian raised his gloved fists to thunderous applause, his fanged mouth opening in what passed for a smile among his kind. A hovering drone descended between them, its central eye glowing red before flashing to green. The signal to begin. Drax wasted no time, charging across the sand with surprising speed for his bulk. His first strike came as a downward hammer blow that would have shattered Kale's collarbone had it connected. Instead, Kale stepped inside the arc of the attack, using the Dracian's momentum against him while delivering a precise strike to the nerve cluster beneath the jaw. One of the few vulnerable points in Dracian physiology. Drax stumbled, momentarily disoriented. The crowd's jeers turned to murmurs of surprise. Kale pressed his advantage, launching a combination of strikes targeting the joining points of the natural armor plates. Another vulnerability, but one that required intimate knowledge of xenobiology to exploit. His time in Alliance Special Operations hadn't been wasted, but Drax was a champion for a reason. Recovering quickly, he adjusted his strategy, keeping Kale at a distance with sweeping strikes that utilized his superior reach. One glancing blow caught Kale's shoulder, the tech glove amplifying the impact enough to send him rolling across the sand. Pain blossomed across his back as Kale regained his footing. The crowd was fully engaged now, their earlier dismissal replaced by the bloodthirsty enthusiasm that made the combat arenas of Azagon Prime infamous throughout the Star Sector. Drax pressed forward, confident in his advantage. "No gloves, no chance, Earthman," he growled in heavily accented Common. "I'll make it quick." Kale didn't waste breath on a reply. Instead, he centered himself, calling on the focus techniques that had kept him alive through years of combat. The arena sounds faded. His vision tunneled until all he could see was his opponent. The subtle shift of weight that telegraphed the next attack. The almost imperceptible favoring of the left leg that suggested an old injury. When Drax charged again, Kale was ready. He ducked under the sweeping right hook and drove upward with the heel of his palm, striking precisely at the underside of the Dracian's jaw. At the same moment, his left foot hooked behind the reptilian's weaker left ankle and pulled. The combination sent the much larger fighter crashing to the sand. Before Drax could recover, Kale was on him, applying pressure to the carotid arteries on either side of the Dracian's neck. A universal vulnerability among oxygen-breathing species. Drax thrashed, his tech-gloved hands clawing at Kale's arms, leaving deep gouges. But Kale maintained the hold, ignoring the pain and the warm trickle of blood running down to his elbows. Gradually, the Dracian's struggles weakened. His eyes rolled back, and his massive body went limp. Kale immediately released the hold and stepped back, breathing hard. He hadn't killed his opponent. Unconsciousness came long before death in a properly applied blood choke. But he'd won decisively against overwhelming odds. The arena fell silent in shock before erupting into chaos. The betting terminals flashed with alerts as automatic payouts were calculated for the few who had wagered on the unknown human. The announcer's voice cracked with excitement. "Incredible! The wild card entry has defeated our champion with nothing but bare hands and what appears to be advanced knowledge of Dracian physiology. Ladies, gentlemen, and non-binary sentients, we are witnessing the emergence of a new star in the combat universe. Medical drones rush to attend to the unconscious Dracian while security units move to escort Kale back to the preparation area." As he walked toward the exit, he caught sight of Vargas in the promoter's box, the man's face a storm of conflicting emotions, anger at his betting loss warring with excitement at the marketing potential of his new fighter. Cale allowed himself a grim smile. The first step of his impromptu plan had worked. He'd gained attention. Now he needed to leverage that attention to access information about Omnicore's involvement in the championship. As he reached the tunnel leading out of the arena, a commotion near the VIP entrance caught his attention. Security personnel were escorting a new arrival to one of the private viewing boxes. A slender figure in flowing robes of deep purple, surrounded by an entourage of aides and guards. Even from a distance, Cale could tell this was no ordinary spectator. The figure moved with the fluid grace of the Vortex people, a reclusive species known for their advanced technology and minimal interaction with the wider galactic community. Their presence at an event like this was unprecedented. Before he could ponder this anomaly further, the security drones herded him into the tunnel, away from the arena and the curious eyes of thousands who had just witnessed the beginning of his very public revenge. The aftermath of Cale's surprising victory was a whirlwind of activity. Medical technicians treated the gouges on his arms while Vargas alternated between berating him for disobeying the plan and gleefully recalculating potential profits from his new fighting sensation. You could triple the viewer engagement with proper marketing, Vargas was saying as he paced the small recovery room. The bare-handed earthling, fighting with primitive techniques against enhanced opponents. The audience loves an underdog story. Cale barely listened, focusing instead on the information he'd managed to extract from the arena's public network during his walk back from the combat floor. Omnicore Corporation had indeed increased their sponsorship of the championship this year, with their CEO, Magnus Rourke, scheduled to attend the finals in person. 5 years of hunting for the man responsible for his squad's deaths. And now a clear path had emerged when he least expected it. "Are you even listening?" Vargas demanded, snapping Cale back to the present. "You're scheduled for media interviews in 20 minutes, and the second-round matchups will be announced immediately after." "No interviews," Kyle said flatly. "I fight. That's it." Vargas threw up his hands. "The silent warrior act? Fine. It'll work with your image." He tapped at his comm unit. "I'll have them focus on your mysterious background instead. Hints of a tragic past. Military training. The audience eats that melodrama up. Too close to the truth for comfort." But Cale let it pass. His cover identity had held for 5 years. A few vague rumors wouldn't compromise it now. A commotion in the hallway outside interrupted Vargas's planning. The door slid open to reveal a security team in the distinctive silver and purple uniforms of Vortex diplomatic guards. They moved with practiced efficiency, scanning the room before taking positions on either side of the doorway. Between them appeared the robed figure Cale had glimpsed earlier. A Vortex woman of indeterminate age, her skin a pale lavender, and her eyes solid black orbs that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Her silver hair was pulled back in an intricate braid that reached her waist. "Leave us," she commanded, her voice melodic but firm. Vargas sputtered in protest. "Now see here, this is my fighter, and we have a schedule to—" The woman turned those black eyes on him, and whatever Vargas saw there made him pale. "Of course, Ambassador. A brief visit. I'll wait outside." He backed out of the room, the door sliding shut behind him. Silence fell as the woman studied Cale with unnerving intensity. Her guards remained motionless by the door, their faces obscured by reflective visors. "You fight without technological assistance," she finally said, the statement somewhere between question and observation. Cale shrugged. "I prefer to rely on what I know won't fail. An unusual philosophy on a world where enhancement is the norm." She moved closer, her movements fluid and precise. "I am Alara, diplomatic envoy of the Vortex Confederation." "Cale Mercer," he replied simply. I know who you are. A slight smile curved her lips, or rather, who you present yourself to be. Kale tensed. The Vortex were rumored to possess technology that bordered on the telepathic. Though most scientists attributed their seemingly supernatural abilities to advanced quantum computing and biological interfaces. Relax, Kale Mercer. Ilara continued. Your secrets remain your own. I am merely observing that all beings wear masks of one form or another. Yours is simply more tactical than most. She circled him slowly, her robes whispering against the floor. Your fighting technique. It incorporates multiple Earth combat disciplines, yet you've adapted them for interspecies confrontation. Military training, obviously, but with significant personal modifications. Is there a point to this analysis? Kale asked, uncomfortable under her scrutiny. Ilara stopped directly in front of him. The point, Kale Mercer, is that you are an anomaly. In an age of technological enhancement, you rely on organic skill. In a society that values spectacle, you seek efficiency. In an arena designed for killing, you chose to render your opponent unconscious rather than dead. She leaned closer, her black eyes seeming to peer into his soul. When I observed your combat, do you know what thought occurred to me? Kale remained silent, wary of where this conversation was heading. I wish you were my husband, Ilara stated, her tone completely matter-of-fact. The declaration was so unexpected that Kale could only stare in confusion. Excuse me? A cultural miscommunication, Ilara said, amusement flickering across her features. In Vortex society, the term does not carry the same romantic or reproductive connotations as in human culture. It refers to a pairing of complementary individuals for mutual benefit and societal advancement. Before Kale could respond to this bizarre clarification, Ilara continued, I have a proposal. The Vortex Confederation is conducting a cultural immersion study of Earth customs and capabilities. Your demonstrated skills make you an ideal subject. I'm not interested in being a research specimen, Kale said firmly. Not a specimen, a representative. Ilara made a gesture, and one of her guards stepped forward, presenting a small device that projected a holographic contract. I am authorized to offer diplomatic protection and resources in exchange for your participation in a series of cultural evaluations. Kale scanned the floating text with suspicion. What kind of evaluations? 5 challenges based on traditional Vortex courtship trials, adapted to incorporate Earth methodologies. Ilara's expression remained unreadable. Successfully complete these challenges, and the Confederation will grant you Level 3 diplomatic status. Level 3 diplomatic status. The implications hit Kale immediately. Such credentials would give him access to restricted areas of Azagon Prime, including Omnicorp corporate headquarters during official functions. It would be a significant shortcut in his quest for vengeance. And if I refuse, he asked, playing for time to think, then you continue your tournament participation unassisted. Ilara replied, though I should mention that my attendance here has drawn the attention of various corporate entities, including Omnicorp. Their representatives have already requested a meeting regarding your unusual combat methods. The mention of Omnicorp sent a chill down Kale's spine. If they took interest in him now, his cover might be compromised before he could act. How soon do these challenges begin? He asked. Ilara's lips curved in a slight smile. The first begins now, with your decision. Will you trust a stranger who offers opportunity wrapped in mystery? Or will you continue alone on your current path? Kale looked at the holographic contract, then at Ilara's inscrutable black eyes. 5 years of hiding, fighting, and slowly gathering scraps of information about his squad's killers. Now fate had dealt him a wild card of his own. "I accept," he said, pressing his thumb to the contract's authentication field. The hologram flashed green before disappearing back into the guard's device. "Excellent," Ilara said. "My staff will coordinate with your handler." She nodded toward the door where Vargas undoubtedly waited. "You will continue your tournament participation as a cover for our arrangement." She turned to leave, then paused. "One more thing. Cale Mercer. The phrase I spoke earlier about wishing you were my husband. It has another meaning in Vortex culture." Her black eyes seemed to shimmer slightly. "It is also what our warriors say when they recognize worthy adversaries. Remember that." With those cryptic words, she swept from the room, her guards falling in behind her, leaving Cale to wonder if he'd just found an ally or created a more dangerous complication in his quest for justice. Vargas was apoplectic when Cale informed him of the arrangement with the Vortex ambassador. "You signed an exclusive contract with me," he shouted, waving his comm unit where said contract was displayed. "I own your fighting rights for the duration of the championship." "Check the fine print," Cale suggested calmly. "Cultural and diplomatic engagements are likely excluded from exclusivity clauses. Standard legal boilerplate." Vargas's face reddened further as he scrolled through the document. "How would you know about contract law?" "I wasn't always a fighter," Cale replied simply. "Fine," Vargas finally conceded, though his expression remained thunderous. "But these engagements better not interfere with your matches. You've become my most valuable asset overnight." "Asset?" The word grated on Cale, reminding him of military commanders who viewed soldiers as resources rather than people. Commanders like the ones who had sent his squad on what was supposed to be a routine diplomatic courier mission, only to have them shot down over Azagon Prime. "I'll be ready for my next fight," Kyle assured him, though privately he wondered what Ilara's challenges would entail. He didn't have to wait long to find out. That evening, as he returned to the modest quarters Vargas had arranged in the competitor's housing block, he found a small package waiting outside his door. Inside was a communication device of unmistakable Vortex design, sleek, silver, and apparently operating on principles that defied standard technology. As it functioned, despite the heavy signal jamming in the competitor's area, a message awaited him. "First challenge, understanding. Tomorrow. Dawn. Coordinates enclosed." Below was a series of numbers that Cale recognized as location markers for the upper levels of Azagon Prime, the wealthy districts where corporate executives and off-world dignitaries resided, far above the industrial smog of the lower levels. Intrigued despite his wariness, Cale set an alarm and tried to rest. His dreams were troubled, filled with the faces of his dead comrades and the mysterious black eyes of Ambassador Ilara. Dawn found him navigating the rarely used public transit tubes to the upper levels, the Vortex communication device serving as both map and access key. The few early morning commuters gave him a wide berth, his fighter's physique and the visible scars on his face marking him as out of place in this realm of privilege. The coordinates led to a surprising destination, a botanical garden dome, one of the few green spaces on the predominantly industrial planet. Inside, the air was noticeably cleaner, filled with the scent of growing things. Carefully maintained paths wound through displays of plants from dozens of worlds, all thriving under the artificial sunlight projected from the dome's ceiling. Ilara waited on a bench near a pond filled with luminescent aquatic flowers. Gone were the formal robes of the previous day, replaced by a simpler outfit of silver gray that nonetheless marked her as Vortex. Her guards were nowhere to be seen. "You came alone," she observed as Cale approached. "Interesting. Should I have brought backup to a botanical garden?" he asked. scanning the peaceful surroundings for hidden threats nonetheless. Most would have in your position. Alara gestured for him to sit beside her. The first challenge is understanding. Before two beings can form any meaningful bond, they must comprehend each other's fundamental nature. Kale remained standing. I thought these challenges would involve combat or skill demonstrations. A very human assumption, Alara said with a hint of amusement. Violence is the measure of worth. The Vortex approach is more holistic. She produced a small crystalline device that she placed on the bench between them. This is a quantum resonance imager. It will create a temporary psychic link between us, allowing surface thoughts and primary emotional states to be shared. Kale took an involuntary step back. You want to read my mind? Not read, share. Alara's black eyes regarded him steadily. I will experience your surface thoughts and emotions. You will experience mine. No deeper memories will be accessed without mutual consent. And if I refuse, then you fail the first challenge, and our arrangement ends. Her tone was matter-of-fact, without judgment. Trust must begin somewhere. Kale Mercer, this is where the Vortex begin. Kale considered his options. The diplomatic credentials Alara offered were his best chance at infiltrating Omnicore and finding evidence against Magnus Rourke. But allowing someone access to his thoughts, even surface ones. How long does this link last? He asked. 1 standard hour, Alara replied. Sufficient for basic understanding, but not so long as to cause psychological distress to the uninitiated. Kale sat on the bench, decision made. Let's get this over with. Alara activated the crystal device. It emitted a soft, pulsing light that seemed to penetrate Kale's vision even when he closed his eyes. A sensation like cool water flowing through his mind followed, bringing with it flashes of alien perception. Colors shifted, some becoming more vibrant while others faded to insignificance. Sounds separated into complex patterns, each with meaning beyond what his human ears normally processed. And beneath it all, emotions not his own. Curiosity dominant, with undercurrents of determination and a strange melancholy that seemed to have no specific source. Your mind is orderly. Alara's voice came both from beside him and seemingly from within his own thoughts. Military discipline provides structure, even in chaos. Kale struggled to respond, disoriented by the dual channels of perception. Your mind is vast, like standing at the edge of an ocean at night. Through the link, he sensed her pleasure at the analogy. A poetic description, unexpected. Don't get used to it, Kyle managed, trying to establish some mental boundary against the alien presence in his consciousness. For the next hour, they sat in mostly physical silence while their minds exchanged surface impressions. Kyle learned that Vortex consciousness processed multiple streams of thought simultaneously, explaining Alara's sometimes disconcerting conversational patterns. Alara, in turn, seemed fascinated by the intensity of human emotional responses and the way Kale's thoughts frequently returned to his fallen comrades. You seek justice, she observed as the link began to fade, the crystal's light dimming. Or is it vengeance? Is there a difference? Kyle asked, blinking as his perception returned to normal, the world seeming flatter and less vibrant. To the Vortex? Yes. Alara retrieved the now dormant crystal. Justice restores balance. Vengeance merely shifts imbalance from one side to another. She studied him with those absorbing black eyes. But you are not Vortex. Your species finds meaning in different patterns. The last traces of the mental link faded, leaving Kale feeling strangely isolated in his own mind. Did I pass your challenge? You participated fully and without deception. That is sufficient. Alara stood, smoothing her silver-gray garment. The second challenge will come tomorrow. Rest and prepare for your tournament match this afternoon. As she turned to leave, Kale called after her. Wait, you never explained why the Vortex are interested in a fighting tournament. Your people aren't exactly known for blood sports. Ilara paused. The Vortex observed many things for many reasons. Kale Mercer. Perhaps that understanding will come with future challenges. With that cryptic response, she continued down the garden path, soon disappearing among the exotic foliage. Kale remained on the bench a while longer, trying to process the strange experience. The lingering impression from Ilara's mind suggested there was much more to her interest in him than cultural research. Beneath her controlled exterior lay purpose, sharp and focused as any weapon he'd ever wielded. Whatever game she was playing, he was now committed. The path to Magnus Rourke and Omnicore lay through her challenges, however strange they might be. And perhaps, a small voice in his mind suggested, there was value in understanding beyond his quest for vengeance. It had been 5 years since he'd allowed anyone close enough to know his thoughts, let alone share them. He touched the wooden charm Rin had given him, still hanging around his neck. One challenge down, he murmured to himself. 4 to go. Kale's second tournament match took place that afternoon against a sentient fighter, a species known for their 4 arms and exceptional speed. Unlike his first opponent, this fighter had observed Kale's techniques against the Dracian and came prepared with a strategy to maintain distance and strike from range. The crowd, significantly larger than the previous day, watched in fascination as Kale methodically closed the distance, absorbing punishment until he could grapple with his opponent. Once in close quarters, the outcome was never in doubt. Kale's knowledge of pressure points and joint vulnerabilities worked as effectively on sentient physiology as it had on Dracian. 3 minutes into the match, his opponent submitted, tapping the sand as Kale applied a complex lock that threatened to dislocate 3 of the sentient's 4 shoulders simultaneously. The arena erupted in cheers, betting terminals flashing with new odds as Kale's reputation grew. From his new position in the promoter's box, Vargas beamed with pride and calculation, already negotiating enhanced viewing rights with various media outlets. In the exclusive diplomatic section, Ilara watched with the same inscrutable expression she'd worn during their morning encounter, her black eyes missing nothing as Kale exited the arena without ceremony or celebration. After mandatory medical checks confirmed he'd sustained only minor injuries. Kale was returning to his quarters when a commotion in the competitor's common area caught his attention. A crowd had gathered around one of the large viewing screens, where a news broadcast showed footage of his fight alongside a scrolling headline. Bare-handed earthling, primitive warrior or corporate saboteur. The report that followed sent ice through Kale's veins. An Omnicore spokesperson was questioning the suspicious timing of an unenhanced human fighter emerging just as their company prepared to unveil new combat augmentation technology at the championship finals. We have reason to believe this individual may be connected to corporate espionage efforts against Omnicore. The sleek representative stated, his refusal to use standard tech gloves prevents proper identity verification through the neural interface system. It was a transparent attempt to discredit him, but one with dangerous implications. If Omnicore pushed for enhanced security screening, his carefully constructed identity might not withstand scrutiny. Kale slipped away from the gathered competitors, his mind racing. He needed to accelerate his plans. Whatever Ilara's challenges entailed, he had to complete them quickly before Omnicore maneuvered to have him removed from the tournament. Or worse. Back in his quarters, the Vortex communication device activated with a new message. Second challenge, adaptation. Tonight, midnight, formal attire required. Attached were more coordinates. These for a location even higher in Azagon Prime's stratified society, the diplomatic enclave where off-world embassies and corporate headquarters maintain neutral ground for negotiations. Formal attire. Kale almost laughed at the absurdity. He owned exactly 2 sets of clothing, his fighting gear and the nondescript civilian clothes he currently wore. Neither would pass muster at a diplomatic function. As if anticipating this problem, a delivery drone arrived moments later bearing a package from the Office of Vortex Cultural Exchange. Inside was a suit of Earth design but clearly Vortex manufacture, the fabric shifting subtly in color depending on the angle of light, somewhere between deep blue and black. Kale examined it with suspicion before reluctantly admitting it was his only option. When he tried it on, the garment adjusted to his measurements automatically, the smart fabric molding to his body with perfect tailoring. Looking in the small mirror of his quarters washroom, he barely recognized himself. The suit transformed him from fighting pit survivor to something approaching the Alliance officer he'd once been. For a moment, Captain Kale Mercer of Earth Alliance Special Operations looked back at him from the mirror, before he blinked the ghost away. Midnight found him ascending to the diplomatic enclave via a private elevator, his Vortex communication device serving as both invitation and security clearance. The doors opened onto a world he hadn't encountered since his military days, one of polished surfaces, soft music, and the quiet murmur of power being exchanged through words rather than blows. The reception hall of the Azagon Prime Diplomatic Center soared 3 stories high, its transparent ceiling offering a view of the actual stars, visible above the planet's polluted atmosphere. Representatives from dozens of worlds and corporations mingled in their cultural finery, served by discreet robotic attendants that hovered silently at the edges of conversations. Kale felt immediately out of place, his fighter's instincts cataloging potential threats and escape routes rather than appreciating the opulent surroundings. Several heads turned as he entered, whispers following in his wake. His tournament appearances had made him recognizable, even in this rarefied setting. "The unexpected warrior arrives," a familiar voice said from behind him. Ilara had approached without making a sound, a skill Kale wouldn't have attributed to a diplomat. "The suit suits you." She wore formal Vortex attire, layers of flowing silver fabric that seemed to contain constellations within their folds. Tiny points of light shifting as she moved. Her silver hair was arranged in an elaborate series of braids interwoven with what appeared to be living flowers that glowed with soft purple light. "I feel like I'm undercover in enemy territory," Kale admitted quietly. "An apt metaphor for the second challenge," Ilara replied. "Adaptation requires one to function effectively in environments beyond one's comfort. For a warrior, the battlefield of words and subtle alliances can be more dangerous than physical combat." She offered her arm in a surprisingly human gesture. "Shall we?" Kale hesitated before placing his hand lightly on her forearm, aware of curious eyes watching their interaction. "What exactly am I supposed to do here?" "Survive," Ilara said with the faintest smile. "Socially, that is, I will introduce you to various diplomatic and corporate representatives. You will engage in conversation, representing both Earth culture and your position as my cultural research subject." "I'm not a diplomat," Kyle warned as they began moving through the crowd, "or particularly sociable." "Hence the challenge," Ilara replied smoothly. "The Vortex value adaptability above most traits. One who cannot adjust to changing circumstances cannot evolve." What followed was a crash course in high-level galactic politics disguised as casual conversation. Ilara introduced Kale to ambassadors, trade representatives, and corporate liaisons, each interaction a careful dance of words where actual meanings lay beneath the surface. To his surprise, Kale found his military training served him well. Years of briefings on interspecies diplomacy and intelligence gathering had prepared him to listen more than speak, to observe body language across species, and to maintain a neutral expression regardless of what he heard. "The tournament fighter has unexpected depths," commented a Toran trade minister after a discussion of shipping regulations that had veiled references to smuggling operations. "One wonders what else lurks beneath the surface." "Don't we all have depths, Minister?" Kyle responded, holding the alien's four-eyed gaze steadily. "The difference is merely in how far down one must go to find them." The minister laughed, a rumbling sound that came from multiple vocal organs. "Well parried. Your earthling is entertaining. Ambassador Ilara." As they moved to the next group, Ilara murmured, "You adapt better than expected." "Don't sound so surprised," Kyle replied. "No, survival requires adaptation." "Indeed." Ilara guided him toward a quieter corner of the reception hall. "However, the true test approaches. Omnicorps representatives are present, including the Director of Security Operations, Leon Voss. She has expressed interest in meeting the primitive fighter causing such a stir." Kale's pulse quickened. Leon Voss was a name he knew from his years of investigation. A former military commander dishonorably discharged for excessive force, now running Omnicorps' private security forces. Not Magnus Rourke himself, but close enough to the power structure to potentially possess valuable information. "I thought this was just a test," he said quietly. "Not an actual intelligence-gathering opportunity." Ilara's black eyes regarded him steadily. "The best challenges serve multiple purposes. Kale Mercer, your goals and mine may differ in specifics while aligning in direction." Before he could question this cryptic statement, a commotion at the main entrance drew attention. A new delegation had arrived, their security detail more extensive and intimidating than the discreet guards of other representatives. "Omnicorps executive leadership," Ilara explained, "earlier than expected." Kale followed her gaze to the tall, silver-haired man at the center of the new group. Magnus Rourke himself, CEO of Omnicorps and the ultimate target of Kale's 5-year quest for justice. The man responsible for the death of his squad, according to the fragments of evidence Kale had pieced together during his time on Azagon Prime. In person, Rourke was imposing, over 6 feet tall with the enhanced physique that came from premium genetic modifications and the best medical care corporate wealth could buy. His face was handsome in a manufactured way, with the too-perfect symmetry that marked extensive cosmetic adjustments. Beside him walked a woman with the ramrod posture of military training. Director Voss, presumably, and a cadre of aides and security personnel. "A change of plans," Ilara said, noting the intensity of Kale's focus. "We will not seek an introduction yet. Your reaction suggests personal history that might compromise your performance in the challenge." "No," Kyle said firmly. "I can handle this. It's just surprising to see him here." Ilara studied him for a moment before nodding. "Very well. But remember, this is a test of adaptation. Whatever personal feelings you harbor must be subordinated to the social requirements of the situation." Kale forced his features into a neutral expression as Ilara led him on an intercept course with the Omnicorps delegation. His heart hammered against his ribs, but outwardly, he projected the calm he'd cultivated through years of combat and covert operations. "Ambassador Ilara," Rourke greeted them with practiced charm when they approached. "A pleasure to see the Vortex Confederation represented at our humble planetary gathering." His eyes shifted to Kale, a flicker of something, recognition, concern, crossing his features before being replaced by a politician's smile. "And this must be the fascinating primitive fighter I've heard so much about." "A Kale Mercer," Ilara introduced him, "my cultural research associate." Kale extended his hand in the human tradition, forcing himself to meet Rourke's eyes without revealing the hatred that burned within him. Mr. Rourke. The CEO's handshake was firm, his hand augmented with subtle enhancements that Kale could feel in the unnatural perfection of his grip. An unusual career combination, bare-knuckle fighting and diplomatic research. I contain multitudes, Kale replied evenly. Rourke laughed, the sound as manufactured as his appearance. Indeed you do. My security director has developed quite an interest in your fighting technique. Director Voss? You had questions for Mr. Mercer? The woman beside him stepped forward, her cybernetically enhanced eyes scanning Kale with obvious suspicion. Your combat methodology shows military training inconsistent with your registered background as a civilian transport pilot. It wasn't a question, but Kale treated it as one. I've picked up various techniques during my travels. Necessity is an excellent teacher. Necessity, Voss repeated skeptically. And what necessitated learning pressure point strikes specific to 17 different species? That's not common knowledge. I'm a curious person, Kyle replied with a shrug, and I have a good memory. Rourke interrupted with a wave of his hand. Now, Director. This is hardly the venue for an interrogation. Mr. Mercer is a guest of the Vortex Confederation. He turned to Alara with an ingratiating smile. Though I must admit, Ambassador, your interest in such an unconventional specimen of humanity is intriguing. The Vortex find value in diversity of approach. Alara replied smoothly. Traditional methods often reveal insights that technology obscures. A quaint perspective, Rourke said with barely concealed condescension. Though it runs counter to Omnicore's philosophy of constant enhancement and evolution through technology, different paths may lead to similar destinations, Ilara observed. Or to dead ends, Rourke countered. His attention returned to Kale. Your performance in the tournament has been impressive, Mr. Mercer, but ultimately futile. The championship will demonstrate the superiority of our latest combat enhancements. The age of unaugmented fighters is ending. Everything ends, Kyle replied, his voice level despite the anger churning beneath the surface. Even corporate dynasties. A flash of irritation crossed Rourke's perfect features before his practiced smile returned. Philosophical as well as pugilistic. You've found a rare human. Ambassador Alara. He checked the ornate timepiece on his wrist. If you'll excuse us, I have other dignitaries to greet, as the Omnicore delegation moved away. Director Voss lingered a moment longer, her enhanced eyes narrowing as she studied Kyle. We'll be watching your next match with great interest. Mr. Mercer, she said, her tone making it clear this was more threat than casual observation. When they were alone again, Alara guided Kale toward the terrace doors. You maintained composure admirably, though your heart rate and micro-expressions suggested intense emotional response. You can detect my heart rate? Kyle asked, surprised. A vortex perception extends beyond standard visual spectrum, she explained as they stepped onto the terrace. The cooler air a relief after the crowded reception hall. Your encounter with Rourke held personal significance beyond what you've shared with me. It wasn't a question, but Kale felt compelled to answer nonetheless. Omnicore has interests that don't appear in their corporate manifesto. Most entities do, Alara acknowledged. The question is whether those interests align with or oppose greater galactic stability. Kale leaned against the terrace railing, looking out over the glittering expanse of Azagon Prime's upper levels. Does the Vortex Confederation really care about one corporation's activities? We care about patterns that threaten equilibrium, Ilara said, joining him at the railing. Omnicore's recent expansion into military-grade enhancements has concerning implications. The pieces began to align in Kale's mind. You're not really conducting cultural research, are you? All interactions provide cultural insights, Alara replied with diplomatic evasion. But no, that is not my primary mission on Azagon Prime. And these challenges serve multiple purposes, she repeated her earlier statement. They evaluate your capabilities while establishing your presence in circles that would otherwise be closed to you. Kale turned to face her directly. Why me? There must be dozens of operatives better positioned for whatever you're planning. Ilara's black eyes reflected the city lights below as she considered her response. The vortex observed patterns across vast time frames. Kale Mercer. Sometimes individuals emerge whose actions create ripples that affect larger currents. You are such an individual. Because I fight without tech gloves? He asked skeptically. Because you fight for something beyond yourself, she corrected. Your vengeance quest is merely the surface manifestation of a deeper pattern. Kale wasn't sure how to respond to this mystical assessment before he could formulate a reply. Ilara continued. The second challenge is complete. You have demonstrated adaptation to an environment counter to your natural inclinations. She produced a small silver emblem from within her robes. This grants you provisional diplomatic status. Not yet the level 3 credentials you seek, but a step toward them. Kale accepted the emblem, noting the intricate vortex script etched into its surface. 3 more challenges to go? Yes, the third will test your capacity for cooperation. Ilara moved toward the terrace doors. For now, return to your quarters and prepare for tomorrow's tournament match. Director Voss's interest suggests Omnicore may take a more active role in upcoming events. I can handle Omnicore, Kyle assured her, pocketing the emblem. Ilara paused, looking back at him with an expression that might have been concern, though it was difficult to read emotions in those alien eyes. Be cautious. Kale Mercer, your path and mine may converge for now, but vengeance has a way of consuming those who pursue it too single-mindedly. With that warning, she returned to the reception, leaving Kyle alone with the night sky above and the artificial constellation of city lights below, both equally cold and distant from the burning purpose that had sustained him for 5 long years. The semi-final match of the Star Sector Championship drew record viewership across Azagon Prime and neighboring systems. Kale's unexpected rise through the ranks had captured public imagination. The narrative of an unenhanced human-facing, augmented champions proving irresistible to audiences jaded by predictable corporate-sponsored fighters. His opponent was a Nexian hybrid, a genetically engineered combatant with both mechanical and biological enhancements. Created specifically for arena fighting, 8 feet tall with 4 arms, reinforced skeletal structure, and synthetic muscle fibers. The creature was a walking advertisement for Omnicore's military-grade augmentation programs. As Kale prepared in his assigned area, Vargas paced nervously. This is insanity, the promoter muttered. The betting algorithms give you less than 7% chance of survival, let alone victory. No shame in withdrawing now. You've already exceeded all expectations. I'm not withdrawing, Kyle said as he wrapped his hands with the same simple cloth strips he'd used since his first underground fights. Hey, then at least wear the damn tech gloves, Vargas pleaded. Regulation equipment would give you some protection against that monster. Kale continued his preparations in silence. The tech gloves would indeed offer protection, but they would also connect him to the arena's neural interface system, a system undoubtedly monitored by Omnicore security now that he'd drawn their attention. Your funeral, Vargas finally conceded, throwing up his hands. Though I will say your stubborn primitivism has been marketing gold. Viewership has tripled the projected numbers. When the final call came, Kale touched the wooden charm from Rin and headed for the arena entrance. The roar that greeted him was deafening, far louder than his previous matches. The championship arena had been expanded to accommodate the swelling crowd, temporary seating added to the upper tiers. In the diplomatic box, Kale spotted Ilara's distinctive silver-white hair, her posture formal and attentive, nearby. Magnus Rourke and the Omnicore delegation watched with predatory interest, Director Voss's enhanced eyes tracking his every movement. The Nexian hybrid entered from the opposite side to appreciative cheers and corporate-sponsored chants. Up close, the creature was even more imposing than the promotional materials suggested, a towering amalgamation of cutting-edge technologies and genetic modifications, its four eyes glowing with artificial intelligence assistance. "Her combatants, prepare!" The announcer's voice boomed through the arena as the hovering referee drone positioned itself between them. The Nexian activated its tech gloves, the equipment humming with power as energy fields formed around all four of its massive fists. It bared sharpened teeth in what might have been a smile or a threat display. Small human, it rumbled in surprisingly clear common, "Break easily." Kale settled into his stance, centered and calm despite being dwarfed by his opponent. "We'll see." The drone flashed green, and the semifinal began. The Nexian moved with shocking speed for its size, covering the distance between them in a blur of motion. Its first strike, a downward hammer blow from its upper right arm, would have ended the match instantly had it connected. Kale sidestepped with millimeters to spare, the force of the impact sending sand exploding upward where he'd stood a heartbeat earlier. Without pausing, the creature followed with a combination from its remaining arms, forcing Kale into a defensive retreat. The crowd's excitement built as the human fighter narrowly avoided what seemed like certain defeat, each near miss drawing gasps and cheers. Kale knew he couldn't win through conventional methods. The Nexian's reach, strength, and multiple limbs gave it overwhelming advantages in direct combat. Instead, he focused on observation, looking for patterns in the attack sequences, seeking the flaw that must exist in any system, no matter how perfectly engineered. 2 minutes into the match, he found it. The Nexian's lower left arm moved fractionally slower than the others, perhaps a calibration issue or a minor malfunction in the neural interface controlling its movements. Each time the creature initiated a combination attack, that arm lagged by milliseconds. Kale took a calculated risk, allowing himself to be backed against the arena wall. The Nexian, sensing victory, launched a coordinated forearm strike designed to crush its opponent. Kale dropped and rolled at the last possible moment, the creature's momentum carrying its arms into the reinforced wall with bone-jarring force. In the instant of impact, Kale struck at the exposed junction where the lower left arm connected to the torso, a point where mechanical augmentation interfaced with biological components. His bare fist, hardened by years of conditioning, drove into the precise spot where neural control modules would be located. The effect was immediate. The Nexian's lower left arm went limp, its tech glove flickering and dying. A roar of pain and rage echoed through the arena as the creature spun to face Kale, its remaining arms lashing out in less coordinated attacks. Kale maintained his focus, seeking the next vulnerability. The Nexian's programming would be adjusting, compensating for the disabled limb by redirecting resources to its remaining arms. That redistribution would create new weaknesses, however temporary. The fight became a deadly dance, the Nexian's overwhelming power and reach against Kale's precision and adaptability. Each time the creature seemed to have him cornered. Kale would find an opening, strike at a vulnerable connection point, and retreat before the counterattack could land. By the 7-minute mark, the Nexian was visibly deteriorating. 2 of its 4 arms hung useless, its movements becoming increasingly erratic as Kale's strategic strikes disrupted the neural interfaces controlling its enhanced systems. The crowd had fallen into a stunned silence, watching the impossible unfold before them. In the diplomatic box, Magnus Rourke's perfect face had hardened into a mask of cold fury, while beside him, Director Voss spoke urgently into a communication device. Ilara watched with the same inscrutable expression she always maintained in public, though Kale thought he detected a certain satisfaction in her posture. The end came suddenly. The Nexian systems failing and combat algorithms unable to adapt to an opponent who exploited weaknesses they weren't programmed to protect, attempted a desperate charge. Kale timed his response perfectly, stepping into the attack rather than away from it. As the creature's remaining functional arms reached for him, he drove upward with the heel of his palm, striking the underside of the Nexian's jaw with precisely calculated force. The impact traveled through the creature's skull and into the primary neural control module at the base of its brain, like a puppet with cut strings. The Nexian froze mid-motion, its glowing eyes flickering once before going dark. It toppled forward, crashing to the sand with an impact that sent tremors through the arena floor. Silence held for 3 heartbeats before the crowd erupted in chaotic noise, cheers, shouts, arguments over betting outcomes, and the thunderous stomping of feet that threatened to shake the arena's foundations. Kale stood over his fallen opponent, breathing hard but otherwise showing little sign of the tremendous effort the victory had required. He looked up at the diplomatic box, meeting first Ilara's gaze, then Rourke's. The Omnicore CEO's expression promised consequences beyond the tournament. Medical drones rushed to attend to the Nexian while the announcer struggled to be heard over the continuing uproar. Incredible, unprecedented, the bare-handed Earthling advances to the finals. As security drones moved to escort Kale from the arena, a small figure darted past them and ran across the sand. It was Rin, the girl he'd saved in the marketplace days earlier. "You did it!" she cried, throwing her arms around his waist in a quick hug before security could intervene. "Father's watching from home. His treatments are working." Kale managed a tired smile, the first genuine one since the tournament began. "Good. Now get back to him before you get in trouble." The security drones surrounded them, insistently herding Kale toward the exit while gently but firmly directing Rin toward the spectator area. As they parted, the girl called out, "The whole lower city is cheering for you. You're showing them we don't need their enhancements to be strong." Her words followed him into the tunnel, adding a dimension to his victory he hadn't anticipated. What had begun as a cover for his vengeance quest had somehow become a symbol for the unaugmented population of Azagon Prime, a demonstration that humanity's natural capabilities still held value in an age of ubiquitous enhancement. In the preparation area, medical technicians swarmed him, ignoring his protests that he required minimal treatment. As they worked, Vargas arrived, his earlier doubts replaced by almost manic excitement. "You magnificent lunatic," the promoter exclaimed. "Do you have any idea what you've done? The viewership numbers broke every record in the sector. The finals will be the most watched event in Azagon Prime history." Kale barely listened, his mind already moving beyond the tournament to the opportunities his victory might create. With his newfound notoriety and Ilara's diplomatic credentials, accessing Omnicore's inner circle, and Magnus Rourke himself, was now within reach. A subtle vibration from the Vortex communication device in his pocket pulled him from these thoughts. The message was characteristically brief. "Third challenge? Cooperation? Tomorrow? Noon. Coordinates enclosed." The listed location was unexpected. the lower city markets near where he'd first encountered Rin and the Razor Gang. What could Alara possibly want in that squalid district? Before he could ponder this further, a commotion at the entrance to the medical area drew his attention. Director Voss had arrived with a squad of Omnicorps security personnel in full tactical gear. "A Cale Mercer," she announced formally. "You are required to submit to enhanced security screening before the championship finals." Vargas stepped forward, business instincts overriding his usual deference to corporate authority. "On what grounds? My fighter has complied with all tournament regulations." "New protocols," Voss replied without looking at him. "The championship sponsor has authority to implement additional security measures at any stage." She fixed her enhanced eyes on Cale, particularly when sabotage is suspected. "Sabotage?" Vargas sputtered. "He won fair and—" "The Nexian combatant experienced multiple system failures consistent with targeted electromagnetic interference." Voss cut him off. "Mr. Mercer will accompany us to Omnicorps security facilities for scanning and questioning." Cale knew what this meant. Once in Omnicorps custody, his identity would be subjected to scrutiny his cover couldn't withstand. Worse, he'd be separated from Alara and her diplomatic protection, eliminating his best chance at reaching Rourke. "I must decline," he said calmly. "As a cultural research associate of the Vortex Confederation, I have diplomatic immunity from corporate security procedures." Voss's expression hardened. "Provisional status doesn't—" "Actually, it does," interrupted a new voice as Alara entered the medical area, two of her silver-uniformed guards flanking her. "Under Section 7 of the Azagon Prime Diplomatic Protocols, which Omnicorps signed upon establishing headquarters here." She approached with measured steps. "My associate will not be subjected to your scanning procedures. Director Voss." Voss's cybernetic eyes flicked between Cale and Alara, calculations almost visible behind their enhanced pupils. "This matter will be escalated to planetary authorities," she finally said. "By all means," Alara replied with perfect composure. "The Vortex Confederation welcomes clarity on jurisdictional matters." She turned to Cale. "If you've received sufficient medical attention, we have diplomatic matters to discuss." The standoff lingered for several tense seconds before Voss signaled her security team to stand down. "The finals are in 2 days," she said to Cale. "This issue will be resolved before then." As the Omnicorps personnel departed, Vargas exhaled dramatically. "Political complications were not in our contract," he complained to Cale. "Though I suppose the added drama will boost viewership even further." "Your fighter requires rest," Alara informed the promoter. "Vortex business will occupy him until tomorrow evening." Vargas looked as though he might protest but thought better of challenging the ambassador. Fine. Just have him back in fighting condition for the pre-finals media event." He bustled away, already engaged in an animated conversation on his comm unit about leveraging the diplomatic controversy for publicity. When they were relatively alone, Ilara's guards maintaining a discreet perimeter, Cale spoke quietly. "That was close." "Indeed," Ilara agreed. "Omnicorps grows increasingly desperate to remove you from the equation. Your victory against their prototype was embarrassing for them." "Prototype?" Cale asked, suddenly alert. "The Nexian was more than a tournament fighter," Ilara confirmed. "It represented a new line of combat units Omnicorps intends to market to various military forces throughout the sector." The implications were clear. If Omnicorps was developing advanced combat units with the same technology that had malfunctioned so catastrophically in the arena, their military contracts could be at risk. "They'll try again before the finals," Cale predicted. "Hence the acceleration of our schedule," Ilara replied. "The third challenge cannot wait until tomorrow. We must proceed immediately." "To the lower markets?" Kale questioned, recalling the coordinates from her message. Yes, after you change into something less conspicuous. She nodded toward his fighting attire, still covered in arena sand. Meet me at the coordinates in 1 hour. Come alone and unobserved, if possible. As she turned to leave, Kale called after her. What exactly does cooperation entail in Vortex challenges? Ilara paused, those black eyes unreadable as ever. Working together toward a common goal while acknowledging separate motivations, she said. A concept I believe you're familiar with from your military background. With that cryptic response, she departed with her guards, leaving Kale to wonder exactly what common goal would take them to the lawless lower markets of Azagon Prime, and what separate motivations she might have beyond her stated diplomatic mission. An hour later, dressed in nondescript clothing and with a hooded jacket concealing his increasingly recognizable features, Kale made his way through the twisting alleys of the lower city. He'd taken a circuitous route, using service tunnels and maintenance shafts to avoid the main transit hubs where Omnicore security would likely be watching. The coordinates led to a decrepit building on the edge of the market district, its facade crumbling from decades of industrial pollution. No sign indicated its purpose, but the reinforced door and subtle security measures suggested it wasn't as abandoned as it appeared. Kale approached cautiously, scanning for surveillance devices or security personnel, finding none obvious. He knocked on the door in the pattern specified in Ilara's message, 3 quick taps followed by 2 slower ones. The door slid open to reveal not Ilara, but a familiar face. Tycho, a fellow fighter from the underground pits where Kale had earned his living before the tournament. The burly man's scarred face broke into a grin of recognition. The champion returns to the gutter, he said with gruff affection. Come in before someone spots you. Kale stepped inside, the door sealing behind him with the hiss of pressure locks engaging. The interior belied the building's external appearance, clean, well lit, and equipped with technology far beyond what should be available in the lower city. What is this place? Kyle asked as Tycho led him down a corridor. Command Center for the Resistance. Tycho replied matter-of-factly. Been operating for about 3 years now, small at first, but growing since the corporate crackdowns began. Kale processed this information with surprise. He'd been aware of unrest in the lower city, impossible not to be when living among the unaugmented population struggling under corporate rule, but had no idea an organized resistance existed. The corridor opened into a large central room where about 20 people worked at various stations, monitoring communications, analyzing data, and maintaining what appeared to be an independent network isolated from Azagon Prime's corporate-controlled systems. Ilara stood at a central holographic display with several resistance members. Her formal diplomatic attire replaced by practical clothing similar to what the others wore. She looked up as Kale entered. Our final participant has arrived, she announced. We can begin. As Kale approached, he recognized another familiar face. Mara, a former medic who had treated his injuries after particularly brutal underground fights. She nodded to him with professional respect. Quite a setup you have here, Kyle observed, taking in the sophisticated equipment. I had no idea. That was the point, Tycho said. We knew you were hunting Omnicore, but your approach was too direct. Would have gotten yourself killed without achieving anything. Ilara gestured to the holographic display, which showed a detailed schematic of what appeared to be a large corporate facility. The third challenge, cooperation, requires us to work together toward a common objective while maintaining our individual purposes. And what exactly is this common objective? Kale asked, studying the schematic with growing recognition. It was Omnicore's Azagon Prime headquarters, the very heart of the corporation he'd been investigating for 5 years. Information extraction, Ilara replied. Omnicore has been developing more than enhanced fighters. Their latest project involves genetic manipulation and neural programming on an unprecedented scale. Mara stepped forward, her medical training evident in the precise way she manipulated the holographic display to zoom in on a specific section of the complex. They're calling it the Bare Hand Initiative, ironically enough. Soldiers with genetically enhanced strength and reflexes but appearing completely unaugmented. Perfect infiltrators, Tycho added grimly. Able to pass any scan for tech enhancements because they don't have any. Just biological modifications at the cellular level. Kale absorbed this information, connecting it to fragments he'd gathered over the years. This is why they shot down our transport, he said quietly. My squad was carrying diplomatic documents about illegal genetic research. Ilara nodded. The Earth Alliance had discovered Omnicore's early experimental facilities in the Procyon system. Your diplomatic package contained evidence that would have triggered sanctions and ended their military contracts. How do you know all this? Kale demanded. The Vortex observed patterns, Ilara said, echoing her earlier cryptic statements. We've been monitoring Omnicore's activities for decades. Their recent acceleration toward weaponized genetic modification threatens galactic stability. Kale turned back to the schematic. So what's the plan? We can't exactly walk in through the front door. Actually, Tycho said with a grin, that's exactly what you're going to do. Mara manipulated the display again, bringing up what appeared to be an invitation. Tomorrow night, Omnicore is hosting a reception for tournament sponsors and VIPs. As a finalist, you'll be expected to attend. And as my diplomatic associate, you have legitimate access, Ilara added. While the reception occupies the security forces, a small team will access their secure data center through maintenance tunnels. What do you need me to do? Kyle asked, already seeing where this was heading. Create a distraction, Tycho confirmed. Something significant enough to draw attention and security resources away from the data center. Ilara's black eyes held Kale's gaze. This is the essence of cooperation. We each play our part, trusting others to perform theirs, even when we cannot observe or control their actions. Kale considered the plan. It aligned with his own goals, getting inside Omnicore headquarters and potentially closer to Rourke, while serving the Resistance's broader objectives. Yet something felt off. Why now? He asked. You've obviously been planning this for some time. Why wait for the tournament and my involvement? Mara and Tycho exchanged glances before the medic answered. Security has been impenetrable until now. The championship finals created an opportunity. Omnicore's pride in showcasing their new combat technology has led them to lower certain barriers, and your unexpected success has thrown their security protocols into disarray. Ilara added, They're focused on you as an individual threat rather than looking for a coordinated operation. It made sense, yet Kale sensed there were still pieces of the puzzle he wasn't seeing. Nevertheless, this was the closest he'd come to infiltrating Omnicore in 5 years of hunting. I'm in, he said simply. What's my distraction? Tycho's grin widened. How do you feel about challenging Magnus Rourke himself to a demonstration match? Kale's eyebrows rose. The CEO of Omnicore, he's not a fighter. That's where you're wrong, Mara said, bringing up a new file on the display. An older military record showing a younger Magnus Rourke in Earth Alliance Special Forces uniform. Before he was a corporate executive, he was a combat specialist, one of the first to undergo the early enhancement procedures that eventually led to Omnicore's current technology. Kale studied the image with growing understanding. So he's augmented. Extensively, Ilara confirmed. Though he maintains the appearance of natural physicality, his enhancements are internal, skeletal reinforcements, muscle density augmentation, neural response accelerators. The perfect advertisement for their technology, Tycho added. The successful businessman who's also physically superior but doesn't need visible enhancements to prove it. Cale's mind raced with implications. Rourke wasn't just a corporate executive who had ordered the death of his squad. He was a former military operative himself, one who had chosen enhancement over natural human capability. His ego won't let him refuse a challenge from the primitive fighter who's embarrassing his company's technology. Mara predicted, especially not in front of potential military clients. While security focuses on protecting the CEO during this unexpected demonstration, we extract the data. Ilara concluded, cooperation toward a common goal. Cale nodded slowly. What about after, once you have the data? The information will be distributed to multiple governments and independent media outlets. Ilara said, Omnicore's illegal genetic program will be exposed, triggering investigations and likely criminal charges. And Rourke? Cale pressed. Ilara's expression remained unreadable. Justice takes many forms, Cale Mercer. The system you seek to honor with your vengeance would prefer legal prosecution to personal retribution. It wasn't the answer he wanted, but Cale recognized the truth in her words. 5 years of focusing solely on revenge had narrowed his perspective. His squad had died protecting principles of law and diplomacy, not to enable a personal vendetta. Let's plan the detail, he said finally. For the next 2 hours, the group worked through every aspect of the operation. Cale would attend the reception with Ilara, using his status as both tournament finalist and her diplomatic associate to move freely among the guests. At a predetermined time, he would publicly challenge Rourke to demonstrate his company's enhancements against a fighter using only natural human abilities. Whether Rourke accepted or not, the resulting commotion would provide cover for the extraction team to access the secure data center through maintenance tunnels that connected to the lower city. Tycho would lead that team, while Mara coordinated communications from the resistance base. As the planning session concluded, Ilara presented Cale with a new emblem, more elaborate than the provisional one he'd received earlier. For completing the third challenge, she explained. This grants level 2 diplomatic status, 1 step closer to your goal. Cale accepted it with a nod of acknowledgement. 2 more challenges to go. Yes, though they may not take the form you expect, Ilara replied. The path of cooperation often reveals unexpected turns. As the resistance members dispersed to their various preparations, Cale found himself alone with Ilara near the exit. There's something you're not telling me, he said quietly. Ilara considered him for a moment before responding. There are many things I'm not telling you, Cale Mercer, as there are many things you keep to yourself. She moved toward the door. Mutual trust despite incomplete information is also part of cooperation. It wasn't a satisfying answer, but Cale recognized it was the only one he would get for now. As they prepared to leave separately to avoid drawing attention, Ilara paused. Tomorrow night will be dangerous in ways beyond the obvious, she warned. Rourke is more than he appears. So am I, Cale replied. Ilara's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Yes, she agreed. That is why we are here. The reception at Omnicore headquarters was everything one would expect from the wealthiest corporation on Azagon Prime. Opulent, yet tasteful. A careful balance of ostentation and restraint designed to impress without appearing gauche. The central atrium soared 30 stories high, its transparent ceiling revealing the night sky above the planet's polluted atmosphere, while anti-gravity platforms bearing exotic plants and subtle lighting elements floated at various levels throughout the space. Cale arrived with Ilara, both dressed in formal attire that complemented their roles, Him in a variation of the vortex-designed suit from the diplomatic function. Her in ceremonial robes that marked her as an ambassador while allowing freedom of movement if needed. Her 2 guards accompanied them, as protocol demanded, but remained at a discreet distance. Security was visible but not overwhelming, a calculated choice to project confidence rather than paranoia. Kyle noted the positions of both human personnel and automated systems, mentally mapping potential escape routes should the plan go awry. "Relax," Alara murmured as they moved through the receiving line. "You look like you're assessing targets rather than attending a social function." "Force of habit," Kyle replied, consciously loosening his posture. 5 years of hunting, someone doesn't fade overnight. They reached the end of the line where Magnus Rourke himself greeted guests, his perfect smile and immaculate appearance just as manufactured as at their previous encounter. Beside him stood Director Voss, her enhanced eyes sweeping continuously over the arriving guests. "Ambassador Alara," Rourke greeted with practiced charm. "A pleasure to welcome the Vortex Confederation to our humble corporate home." His gaze shifted to Cale, the smile never wavering though his eyes hardened. "And Mr. Mercer, our unexpected tournament sensation. I'm surprised you accepted our invitation, given recent misunderstandings." "I never turn down free food," Kyle replied with deliberate casualness, "especially when it comes with such interesting company." Voss's enhanced eyes narrowed at this, but Rourke laughed, a perfect artificial sound. "Pragmatic as well as skilled, an admirable combination." He gestured toward the main reception area. "Please enjoy our hospitality. The demonstration of our new combat enhancement line begins in 1 hour." As they moved away, Alara murmured, "He's confident." "He should be," Kyle observed. "That's not just cosmetic work. His movements are too perfect, micro-adjustments happening faster than natural reflexes allow." "The prototype for his own products," Alara agreed. "The man who rebuilt himself and now sells the technology to others." They circulated through the gathering, Cale noting the mixture of corporate executives, military officials from various systems, and the elite of Azagon Prime society. In one corner, he spotted Vargas holding court with media representatives, obviously enjoying his newfound prominence as the promoter who had discovered the bare-handed Earthling. At precisely the scheduled time, Rourke ascended to a floating platform in the center of the atrium. The gathering fell silent as spotlights focused on him. "Distinguished guests," he began, his voice perfectly modulated to carry without seeming to shout. "For decades, Omnicore has led the evolution of human potential through technological enhancement. Tonight, we unveil the culmination of that journey, combat augmentation that preserves the aesthetic of natural humanity while delivering unprecedented performance." The platform descended until Rourke stood at floor level in a cleared circle. "Rather than boring you with technical specifications, we've prepared a demonstration. On cue." A second spotlight illuminated a figure entering the circle, the Nexian hybrid Cale had defeated in the semifinals, apparently repaired and reprogrammed. The crowd murmured in recognition and anticipation. This advanced combat unit was recently defeated in tournament conditions by an unenhanced human fighter. An impressive feat that nonetheless revealed valuable data for our final calibrations. Rourke continued smoothly, skillfully turning potential embarrassment into marketing. "Tonight, you'll see the difference those calibrations make." He removed his formal jacket, handing it to an aide. Beneath, he wore a simple black bodysuit that revealed a physique both powerful and perfectly proportioned, the ideal male form according to classical standards. Achieved through extensive modification rather than natural genetics. Our enhanced command units maintain the appearance of unaugmented humanity while possessing strength, speed, and tactical processing capabilities far beyond normal parameters. Rourke explained as he took a fighting stance. Observe. What followed was a choreographed but nonetheless impressive display. The Nexian attacked with all four arms simultaneously, each strike powerful enough to shatter bone. Rourke evaded with inhuman speed, his movements fluid yet precise as he countered with strikes of his own that drove the much larger opponent backward. The demonstration lasted exactly 3 minutes, long enough to showcase Rourke's enhanced capabilities without becoming repetitive. It ended with the Nexian executing a complex attack sequence that Rourke not only evaded, but turned against his opponent, using the creature's momentum to throw it to the floor in a submission hold. Applause erupted as Rourke released the Nexian and returned to his feet. Not a hair out of place nor a drop of sweat visible. He bowed slightly, acknowledging the ovation with practiced humility. This is merely a taste of what Omnicore's next-generation enhancements offer, he said as his jacket was returned to him. Military officials present tonight will receive detailed briefings on deployment options and training programs. Corporate clients can discuss executive protection applications with our sales representatives. As the applause continued, Kale caught Alara's eye. Now was the moment they had planned for. With a slight nod, he began moving toward the demonstration area, his path deliberately casual but direct. Rourke was accepting congratulations from nearby guests when Kale reached the edge of the circle. He waited until the CEO noticed him, then spoke loudly enough to be heard by those nearby. Impressive choreography, he said. But rehearsed demonstrations don't prove much in real combat situations. A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd as Rourke turned to face him fully. The CEO's perfect smile remained in place, though his eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. Mr. Mercer, he acknowledged, I'm glad you enjoyed the demonstration. Perhaps you have suggestions for improvement? Kale shrugged. Just wondering how your enhancements would perform against someone who isn't programmed to let you win. The murmurs grew louder, nearby. Director Voss had begun moving toward them, her hand drifting toward what was undoubtedly a concealed weapon. Rourke's smile tightened. Are you suggesting our demonstration was falsified? I'm suggesting that controlled environments rarely reflect reality. Kale replied evenly. In the arena, I defeated your Nexian using nothing but natural human capabilities. The real test of your enhancements would be facing the same challenge. The implication hung in the air for a moment before Rourke laughed, the sound less perfect than before, with an edge of genuine emotion breaking through. You're challenging me to a match? Here and now? Why not? Kale spread his hands. Your potential clients would surely be impressed by a live demonstration against the tournament finalist, unless you're not confident in your product's capabilities. It was a calculated provocation, designed to appeal to both Rourke's ego and his business instincts. Refusing would suggest weakness or fear. Accepting would create exactly the distraction the resistance team needed. For a moment, genuine anger flashed across Rourke's two perfect features before his corporate mask reasserted itself. He glanced around at the gathered dignitaries and military officials, many of whom were watching with obvious interest. An impromptu demonstration does have a certain appeal, he conceded, his voice once again smoothly controlled, though perhaps with some parameters to ensure safety. A limited exhibition rather than a full combat match. Of course, Kale agreed. First contact only, no follow-through. Just enough to demonstrate relative speed and positioning. Voss had reached Rourke's side and leaned in to whisper something urgently. The CEO waved her off with a slight gesture. Very well, Mr. Mercer, he said, removing his jacket once more. A brief exhibition match, 3 minutes, first contact, scoring only. As Rourke handed his jacket to an aide, Kale removed his own formal jacket and handed it to Alara, who had approached behind him. "Is this wise?" she murmured, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. "Necessary," he replied quietly. "Your team needs time." Alara accepted his jacket with a subtle nod. "The fourth challenge," she said softly. "Sacrifice, risking oneself for a greater purpose." Before Kale could respond to this unexpected revelation, she stepped back, leaving him to enter the demonstration circle where Rourke waited. Security personnel had quickly established a perimeter, keeping guests at a safe distance while allowing clear views of the impromptu match. Hovering camera drones appeared, presumably to record the demonstration for later marketing purposes. Rourke stood relaxed yet alert in the center of the circle, his enhanced physique emphasized by the form-fitting bodysuit. "I should warn you, Mr. Mercer, unlike tournament conditions, I won't be holding back to make this entertaining." Kale took his position opposite the CEO. "Neither will I." A security drone descended to hover between them, its central eye flashing from red to green, the same signal used in the tournament to begin matches. Rourke moved first, covering the distance between them with blinding speed. His first strike, a perfectly executed straight punch aimed at Kale's solar plexus, would have ended the exhibition instantly had Kale not anticipated it. Instead of trying to match the enhanced speed, Kale had begun his evasion before Rourke even moved, reading the subtle weight shift and muscle tension that telegraphed the attack. He pivoted just enough for the strike to miss by millimeters, while simultaneously positioning for a counter. Murmurs of appreciation rippled through the audience. Rourke's expression flickered with momentary surprise before he launched a combination of strikes designed to overwhelm through sheer speed and precision. Kale continued his strategy of anticipation rather than reaction, moving just enough to avoid each attack while conserving energy. It created the illusion that he was nearly as fast as his enhanced opponent, when in reality he was simply reading Rourke's intentions more effectively. A minute into the exhibition, frustrated by his inability to score first contact, Rourke escalated the intensity of his attacks. The calculated precision gave way to genuine effort as his enhanced systems engaged fully. Kale recognized the shift and adjusted accordingly. This was no longer a demonstration but a genuine contest. Exactly what he'd intended. The more Rourke committed to defeating him, the less attention would be paid to other areas of the complex. From the corner of his eye, Kyle noticed Voss speaking urgently into a communication device. Security personnel beginning to move with greater purpose around the perimeter of the reception. The distraction was working, perhaps too well. "Your enhancements are impressive," Kyle commented as he evaded another lightning-fast combination. "Almost as impressive as shooting down unarmed diplomatic transports." Rourke's rhythm faltered momentarily, just enough for Kale to nearly land a counterstrike that the CEO barely avoided. "I don't know what you're talking about," Rourke replied, his voice no longer perfectly modulated but rough with genuine emotion. "Flight EAS 227, Kale said, naming his squad's transport. 5 years ago, carrying evidence of your early genetic experiments. Ring any bells?" Recognition flashed in Rourke's eyes, followed by calculation. "You're not just some pit fighter," he said as they continued their deadly dance. "You're Alliance military." He was, Kale corrected, narrowly avoiding a strike that would have connected with his jaw. "Until your mercenaries shot down my transport and killed my entire squad." Understanding dawned on Rourke's face. "The survivor," he said. "Intelligence said you died in the crash." "Intelligence was wrong," Kale replied, finally seeing the opening he'd been waiting for. As Rourke processed this revelation, his enhanced systems momentarily prioritized cognitive function over combat response, creating a microsecond delay in his defensive adjustments. Kale struck with perfect timing, his open palm stopping precisely 1 centimeter from Rourke's throat. A clear first contact victory had the strike been completed. The audience gasped, then broke into applause at what appeared to be a perfectly executed exhibition match ending in a surprising but fair result. Rourke's expression darkened with genuine anger before his corporate mask reasserted itself. He stepped back and offered a small bow of acknowledgement, then extended his hand in a gesture of sportsmanship. "Impressive, Mr. Mercer," he said, his voice once again smoothly controlled despite the rage visible in his eyes. "You've given our engineers valuable data to incorporate in our next design iteration." Cale accepted the handshake, feeling the carefully restrained strength in Rourke's grip. "Happy to help," he replied with deliberate irony. As they separated, Rourke leaned in slightly. "We should continue this discussion privately," he said, voice pitched for Cale's ears only. "I believe we have mutual interest to explore." Before Cale could respond, a commotion near one of the security stations drew attention. Director Voss was issuing orders to personnel who began moving with renewed urgency. "A security breach in Section 7, Cale overheard one officer reporting. "Unauthorized access to the research databases." The extraction team had been detected. The distraction had worked, but not long enough. Rourke's expression shifted from corporate charm to cold efficiency in an instant. "Excuse me," he said to the nearby guests. "A minor security matter requires my attention. Please continue enjoying the reception." As he strode away, flanked by security personnel, his gaze locked with Cale's for a moment, a promise of reckoning to come. Ilara appeared at Cale's side, returning his jacket. "We need to leave," she said quietly. "Now." "The team," Cale began. "Who has alternative extraction routes," she assured him. "Our presence will only complicate matters." As they made their way toward the exit, maintaining the appearance of guests simply departing rather than fleeing, Kyle noticed increased security activity throughout the atrium. Subtle at first, to avoid alarming the other guests, but unmistakably shifting toward lockdown procedures. They had nearly reached the main doors when Director Voss intercepted them. 4 armed security officers at her back. "Ambassador Ilara," she said with cold formality. "I regret to inform you that we must temporarily detain all guests due to a security incident." Ilara straightened to her full height, her diplomatic authority evident in her posture and tone. "The Vortex Confederation does not recognize corporate authority to detain diplomatic personnel. We will be departing as scheduled." Voss's enhanced eyes narrowed. "I'm afraid I must insist. This is a matter of corporate security." "And this," Ilara replied, producing an ornate communication device, "is a matter of galactic diplomacy. Detaining us would violate 17 different provisions of the Sector Diplomatic Accords." The standoff stretched for several tense seconds before Voss's communication device chimed. She checked it, her expression darkening further. "You may leave," she conceded with obvious reluctance. "But this incident will be reported to planetary authorities." "As is your right," Ilara acknowledged with perfect composure. "Good evening, Director." As they exited the building, Kyle maintained his diplomatic escort position beside Ilara, neither hurrying nor dawdling despite the urge to run. Her guards joined them at the perimeter, and together they proceeded to the waiting diplomatic transport. Only when they were safely inside the vehicle and moving away from Omnicorps headquarters did Cale allow himself to exhale. "That was close," he said. "Did they get the data?" Ilara touched a control on her wrist, activating a secure communication channel. "Status report," she requested. Tycho's voice came through, background noise suggesting he was in motion. "Partial extraction successful. Primary targets acquired, secondary compromised, pursuing alternate exit strategy." "Casualties?" Ilara asked. Negative, Tycho replied. Though it'll be a close thing. Communications going dark for extraction. Rendezvous at secondary location in 3 hours. The channel closed with a soft click. They got something, Kale observed, but not everything. Enough, I hope, Ilara said. We won't know until they complete extraction and analyze the data. Kale leaned back in his seat, the adrenaline of the confrontation with Rourke beginning to fade. You said that was the 4th challenge. Sacrifice. Yes. Ilara's black eyes studied him with that unsettling intensity. Willingness to risk oneself for a greater purpose, without certainty of outcome or reward. I thought there were supposed to be 5 challenges, Kale noted. That was 4 in 2 days. The Vortex do not view challenges as discrete events but as revelatory moments, Ilara explained. Sometimes they cluster when circumstances demand acceleration. And the 5th, Kale asked. Ilara turned her gaze to the window, watching the lights of Azagon Prime's upper levels streaking past. Transformation, she said quietly. The most difficult challenge, and the one that cannot be planned or scheduled. It emerges from the culmination of all that came before. The cryptic answer didn't surprise Kale anymore. He was beginning to understand that Vortex communication operated on multiple levels simultaneously. The literal meaning just one layer of a more complex message. Rourke recognized me, he said instead. He knows why I'm here now. Yes, Ilara agreed. Which makes your participation in the championship finals both more dangerous and more necessary. As bait, Kale concluded. As a focal point, Ilara corrected, so Rourke will be focused on you, creating opportunities elsewhere. Kale considered this. You never intended for me to kill him, did you? Would that bring your squad back? Ilara asked gently. Would it undo the harm Omnicore has caused across multiple worlds? No, Kale admitted, but it would be justice of a sort. Perhaps, Ilara acknowledged. Or perhaps merely the illusion of closure. The Vortex believe true justice restores balance rather than simply eliminating imbalance. They rode in silence for several minutes, the transport taking an indirect route back to the diplomatic quarter to ensure they weren't followed. What happens after the finals? Kale finally asked. Assuming I survive. Ilara's expression softened slightly. That depends on the outcome of the 5th challenge. Kale Mercer. Transformation alters not just circumstances but perspectives. What you desire now may not be what you choose then. It wasn't a satisfying answer, but Kale was too exhausted to press further. The encounter with Rourke had drained him more than he'd anticipated, not physically, but emotionally. After 5 years of hunting the man responsible for his squad's death, to stand face to face with him, to speak the truth aloud for the first time. He touched the wooden charm Rin had given him, drawing comfort from its rough texture. Whatever came next, he was closer to resolution than he'd ever been. Whether that resolution took the form of vengeance, justice, or something else entirely remained to be seen. The transport continued through the glittering upper levels of Azagon Prime, carrying them toward an uncertain rendezvous and the final challenge that awaited. The data extracted from Omnicore's systems confirmed their worst fears. Project Bare Hand was far more advanced than even the Resistance had suspected. A program to create genetically enhanced soldiers who appeared completely unaugmented, capable of infiltrating any organization without detection. They've already produced a prototype squadron. Tycho reported grimly as the Resistance leadership gathered in their hidden command center. 20 units, with genetic modifications that enhance strength, speed, and durability while remaining undetectable by standard medical scans. Mara studied the medical data with professional horror. The cellular modifications are extensive but carefully designed to maintain normal biological signatures. they'd pass any standard enhancement screening. Perfect infiltrators, Kyle observed, and perfect assassins. Ilara manipulated the holographic display to highlight shipping manifests. The prototypes are scheduled for deployment to 3 different planetary governments within the sector. Official designation: Diplomatic Security Consultants. The implications were clear. Omnicorps planned to place their enhanced operatives in positions close to government officials throughout the sector, creating a network of influence or potential elimination targets. "We need to release this information immediately," Tycho urged, "before the deployments begin. Releasing it now would alert Omnicorps that we have their data," Ilara countered. "They would simply accelerate their timetable or modify their approach. We need more proof of intent, not just capability." Kale studied the files more carefully. "There's something missing," he noted. "Command protocols. How do they control these enhanced soldiers once deployed? That would be in the secondary data we couldn't extract." Mara said. "Security locked down those systems before we could access them." Ilara nodded. "The command structure is the final piece we need. Without it, governments might dismiss this as merely experimental research rather than an active threat." Kale's thoughts turned to the championship finals scheduled for the following day. "Rourke will be there," he said, "with maximum security after tonight's breach." "An impossible target," Tycho agreed. "Even with your new diplomatic status, you won't get near their secure systems again." "I don't need to," Kale said slowly as an idea formed. "Rourke himself is the key. He was one of the first to undergo these enhancements, a prototype for the current generation. He must be connected to the command structure." Ilara's black eyes studied him with renewed interest. "You propose to use the finals as an opportunity to extract information directly from Rourke?" "Not information," Kyle clarified. "A confession, public admission of the program's existence and purpose, broadcast live during the championship." The room fell silent as the others considered this audacious plan. "He'll never admit it," Tycho finally said, "not willingly." "He won't have to be willing," Kyle replied, just angry enough to make mistakes. "His ego is his weakness. I saw it during our exhibition match. When provoked, his corporate mask slips." Mara looked skeptical. "Even if you could provoke him, security would cut the transmission before he revealed anything significant." "Not if we have control of the broadcast system," Tycho countered, warming to the idea. "We have sympathizers among the technical crew. With proper preparation, we could ensure a continuous live feed, even if Omnicorps tries to terminate it." Ilara had remained silent, her expression unreadable as the humans debated. Finally, she spoke. "This plan has merit, but extreme risk. Rourke will be prepared for confrontation after tonight's events. He may take preemptive action to remove you from the equation entirely." "Let him try," Kale said with grim determination. "I've waited 5 years for this. I'm not backing down now." The 5th challenge approaches faster than anticipated, Ilara observed cryptically. Transformation often emerges from moments of greatest pressure. The planning continued late into the night, each aspect of the strategy dissected and refined. Technical specialists from the Resistance worked on securing control of the broadcast systems. Intelligence operatives reported on enhanced security measures being implemented at the arena. Medical personnel prepared contingency plans for various injury scenarios. Throughout it all, Kale maintained a quiet focus, his mind cycling through combat scenarios and potential provocations that might break Rourke's carefully constructed public persona. The man had revealed genuine emotion twice now, first when Kale defeated his Nexian champion, and again during their exhibition match. The key would be pushing him past the point of calculated response into reactive anger, where secrets might slip out. As the session concluded and the Resistance members dispersed to their various assignments, Ilara accompanied Kale to the private quarters they had arranged for him, a safe location away from both the competitors' housing and her diplomatic residence, where Omnicore security would likely be watching. "You should rest," she advised as they reached the door. "Tomorrow will demand all your resources, both physical and mental." Kale nodded, fatigue finally catching up with him. "What about you? Do Vortex need sleep?" A slight smile curved Ilara's lips. "We require neural reset periods, though not precisely analogous to human sleep. I will engage in preparation rituals before tomorrow's events." As she turned to leave, Kale called after her. "Ilara, if things go wrong tomorrow..." She paused, those black eyes unreadable as ever. "Yes?" "Make sure the data gets out," he said. "Whatever happens to me, make sure my squad didn't die for nothing." Ilara studied him for a long moment before responding. "The fifth challenge, transformation, requires moving beyond the self-identity that has defined one's existence. You have been the survivor and the avenger for 5 years. Kale Mercer. Tomorrow may demand you become something else entirely." With those cryptic words, she departed, leaving Kale to ponder their meaning as he prepared for what might be his final confrontation with the man responsible for his squad's death. Sleep came surprisingly easily, his body's need for recovery overriding the tension of anticipation. His dreams were vivid, but not the usual nightmares of burning transport ships and dying comrades. Instead, he saw Rin's hopeful face, Ilara's inscrutable eyes, and fleeting images of Earth, a home he hadn't seen in 5 years and might never see again. He woke before dawn, refreshed despite the gravity of the day ahead. A package waited outside his door, tournament attire specially prepared by the Resistance, with subtle modifications to allow for concealed communication devices and defensive measures against potential Omnicore treachery. As Kale dressed, he touched the wooden charm Rin had given him, now a talisman of sorts. Whatever happened today would bring resolution one way or another. His 5-year quest for vengeance had evolved into something larger than personal retribution, a chance to expose corruption that threatened the entire sector. Captain Lena Vasquez, Lieutenant Sam Rodriguez, Flight Officer Tara Chen, Technical Sergeant Mark Lee, Intelligence Officer David Park. His squad had died protecting principles of justice and transparency. Today, he would honor their sacrifice by doing the same, whatever the personal cost. The championship arena was a spectacle beyond even the previous matches, expanded to accommodate triple the usual capacity, with holographic projections extending the viewing experience to overflow areas throughout Azagon Prime. It hummed with the energy of nearly 100,000 spectators gathered to witness the culmination of the tournament. Kale's entrance drew a thunderous response from the crowd. In less than a week, he had transformed from unknown pit fighter to folk hero, the unenhanced human challenging the corporate paradigm of technological superiority. Banners bearing his name and image appeared throughout the stands, many from the lower city districts where his victories had become symbols of resistance against corporate domination. In the preparation area, Vargas practically vibrated with excitement, oblivious to the larger stakes at play. "The viewing numbers are astronomical," he exclaimed, showing Kale the metrics on his comm unit. "Whatever happens today, you'll never have to fight in those filthy underground pits again. I've already received endorsement offers from 16 different companies looking to associate with the natural human aesthetic you've popularized." Kale barely listened, his focus on the final elements of the plan. Through carefully concealed communication devices, he confirmed that Resistance technicians had successfully infiltrated the broadcast systems. Tycho and his team were in position to ensure the transmission continued uninterrupted even if Omnicore tried to cut it off. Most importantly, Ilara had secured a position in the diplomatic box directly adjacent to the corporate leadership section where Rourke would be watching. Her presence would ensure that when the moment came, there would be witnesses beyond Omnicore's control to verify whatever revelations emerged. "Your opponent is entering now," Vargas reported, checking the arena feeds. "Another Nexian hybrid, but this one's different, bigger, more enhancements. They're calling it the executive prototype." Kale wasn't surprised. After the embarrassment of the semi-final defeat, Omnicore would deploy their most advanced model to ensure victory in the finals. "Perfect," he said quietly. Vargas misinterpreted his response as confidence rather than strategic satisfaction. "That's the spirit, though maybe ease up on the corporate sabotage accusations this time. Some of those companies offering endorsements are Omnicore subsidiaries." The final call came. As Kale moved toward the arena entrance, Vargas grabbed his arm. "Listen," the promoter said, suddenly serious. "I know we haven't always seen eye to eye, but what you've accomplished is remarkable. Whatever happens out there today, you've changed the game. Remember that." Kale nodded, unexpectedly touched by the promoter's sincerity. "Thanks, Vargas, for the opportunity." The roar that greeted him as he entered the arena was deafening, a physical wall of sound that vibrated in his chest. The expanded seating rose in concentric circles, packed with spectators from every level of Azagon Prime society. Holographic displays hovered above, showing close-up views for those seated farther back. Across the combat surface, once again the rusty red sand of previous matches, waited his opponent. The executive prototype was indeed a modified Nexian, but with significant differences from the semi-final version. More humanoid in proportion despite its greater size. With only 2 arms rather than 4, its synthetic muscle structure visible beneath translucent skin. Most notably, its face bore a disturbing resemblance to human features, though scaled to its larger dimensions. The corporate boxes directly overlooked the arena floor. Kale spotted Magnus Rourke in the central position, surrounded by security personnel and what appeared to be military officials from various systems, potential clients for the technology on display. Director Voss stood at his right hand, her enhanced eyes fixed on Kale with undisguised hostility. In the adjacent diplomatic box, Ilara sat with perfect composure, her silver-white hair arranged in elaborate braids intertwined with small devices that appeared decorative but likely served communication or surveillance functions. Their eyes met briefly across the distance, an unspoken confirmation passing between them. "Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of all designations," the announcer's voice boomed through the arena. "Welcome to the championship finals of the Star Sector tournament." The crowd's response rattled the very foundations of the structure. Today's final match presents the ultimate test of evolution in one corner, the sensation of the tournament, the unenhanced human fighter who has defied all odds, Kale Bare Hands Mercer. Another deafening roar washed over the arena as spotlights focused on Kale and his opponent, the pinnacle of Omnicore's enhancement technology, the executive prototype, Nexus Prime. The Nexian hybrid raised its arms as energy fields formed around its hands, not the standard tech gloves of previous matches, but something more integrated, more powerful. Combatants prepare for the championship final. The hovering referee drone descended to its position between them, its central eye glowing red as it waited for both fighters to signal readiness. Kale settled into his stance, centered and focused despite the cacophony surrounding him. This match was merely the prelude to the real confrontation, the vehicle that would deliver him to his true purpose. The drone's eye flashed green, and the final began. Unlike his previous opponents, Nexus Prime did not immediately attack. Instead, it circled cautiously, its movements fluid and precise in a way the earlier Nexian had not been. This was indeed a superior model, with more sophisticated programming and enhanced capabilities. Kale matched its movement, maintaining distance while studying its behavior patterns. The crowd's initial frenzy quieted to a tense hush as they watched this unexpected strategic opening. Adaptive combat algorithms, the Nexian said in a disturbing approximation of human speech. Your previous techniques have been analyzed and countered. Machines always think they can predict humans, Kale replied. That's their fundamental flaw. He initiated the first exchange, a probing attack designed not to damage but to evaluate the Nexian's defensive protocols. The creature responded with perfect technical precision, neither overcommitting nor leaving openings. For the next 2 minutes, they engaged in a complex dance of attacks and counters, each testing the other's capabilities without fully committing. The crowd's energy built again as they recognized the high-level combat chess being played out before them. In the corporate box, Rourke watched with evident satisfaction, occasionally commenting to the military officials beside him as the Nexian demonstrated its advanced capabilities. Kale allowed himself to be driven back toward the arena wall, appearing to struggle against the Nexian's superior speed and strength. It was a calculated performance, showing vulnerability while conserving energy for the crucial later stages of the plan. Your defeat will prove the superiority of enhancement, the Nexian stated as it pressed its advantage. The natural human form is obsolete. Is that your programming talking or Rourke's philosophy? Kale countered, loud enough for nearby audio pickups to capture. The Nexian paused fractionally, a hesitation in its otherwise perfect performance. I am the future of combat evolution. You're a tool, Kale replied, using the opening to slip away from the wall. Like all of Rourke's creations, built for control, not improvement. In the corporate box. Rourke's expression tightened slightly, a micro-reaction that suggested Kale's words had reached their target. The fight intensified, the Nexian abandoning its methodical approach for more aggressive tactics. Kale weathered the assault, absorbing impacts he couldn't fully evade while looking for the pattern within the onslaught. 5 minutes into the match, longer than any of his previous tournament fights, Kale began to implement the next phase of the plan. Rather than continuing a defensive strategy, he launched his own attacks, targeting not the obvious vulnerability points but instead striking at random intervals and locations. The seemingly chaotic approach confused the Nexian's predictive algorithms, creating momentary processing delays as it attempted to identify the pattern in Kale's attacks. Each time it hesitated, Kale exploited the opening. Landing strikes that, while not devastating individually, began to accumulate impact. Irregular combat pattern detected, the Nexian announced, its synthetic voice showing the first hints of strain. Adjusting parameters. That's the problem with programming. Kale replied, continuing his psychological warfare. It can only respond to what it's been prepared for. Like Omnicore's attack on Earth Alliance diplomatic vessels. Programmed responses to threats against corporate interests. In the corporate box, Rourke stood abruptly, his perfect features contorted with anger. He spoke urgently to Director Voss, who immediately reached for her communication device. The match continued, but now Kale could see security personnel moving with greater purpose around the perimeter of the arena. The provocations were working. Rourke was reacting emotionally rather than strategically. 10 minutes in, the Nexian began showing signs of system strain. Its movements, while still dangerously fast and powerful, lacked the fluid precision of earlier exchanges. The adaptive algorithms were struggling to counter Kale's unpredictable fighting style. Kale pressed his advantage. no longer holding back but implementing the full range of techniques he'd developed during his military career and refined in 5 years of survival fighting. Each strike targeted specific neural control nodes in the Nexian's hybrid physiology, gradually degrading its combat effectiveness. The crowd's response built to a frenzy as they sensed the momentum shifting. What had seemed an inevitable showcase of corporate technology's superiority was transforming into another improbable victory for the unenhanced human. In the corporate box, Rourke's composure had visibly deteriorated. He gesticulated angrily at subordinates while keeping his gaze fixed on the match below. Director Voss appeared to be coordinating security movements, her enhanced eyes constantly scanning the arena for threats beyond the official match. 15 minutes in, now the longest match of the tournament, Kale executed the decisive sequence. A feinted strike to the Nexian's primary sensor array drew its defensive resources upward, leaving its central processing nexus momentarily exposed. Kale's follow-up strike, a perfectly timed palm heel to the creature's midsection, connected with exactly the force needed to disrupt the neural interface connecting biological and mechanical systems. The Nexian froze mid-motion, its energy fields flickering erratically. Synthetic muscles spasmed as contradictory commands flooded its system. With mechanical precision, it toppled backward onto the sand, limbs twitching in uncoordinated movements. The arena erupted in chaos, spectators on their feet, screaming and chanting Kale's name as the impossible victory unfolded before them. The announcer's voice barely carried over the din. Incredible! The unenhanced human has defeated Omnicore's most advanced combat unit. Ladies and gentlemen, your new Star Sector champion, Kale Bare Hands Mercer. But Kale wasn't finished. As medical drones rushed to attend to the fallen Nexian, he turned directly to the corporate box where Rourke stood, face contorted with fury. Your technology failed again. Rourke, Kale called out, his voice amplified by the arena's audio system, now under resistance control. Just like it failed 5 years ago when you ordered the destruction of Earth Alliance transport EAS-227. The accusation cut through the celebratory noise, bringing a sudden hush to portions of the crowd nearest the corporate box. Rourke's response was immediate and uncharacteristically emotional. Security, remove him from the arena immediately. Security personnel began moving toward Kale, but resistance members embedded among the arena staff created strategic delays and confusion in the response. Why did you shoot down an unarmed diplomatic vessel? Kale continued, the audio system ensuring his words reached every corner of the arena and the billions watching via broadcast. Was it because they discovered your illegal genetic enhancement program, the one you're now selling to military forces throughout the sector? Rourke's perfect facade cracked entirely. You know nothing, he shouted, his enhanced voice carrying without amplification. That transport was carrying industrial espionage materials stolen from Omnicore facilities. They were carrying evidence of human rights violations, Kyle countered. Illegal genetic experimentation on unwilling subjects. The same technology you're showcasing today. The crowd had fallen into stunned silence, the championship victory now overshadowed by the public accusation and response. In the diplomatic box, Ilara sat forward slightly, her attention focused entirely on Rourke's increasingly emotional reactions. Our research saved humanity from obsolescence, Rourke declared, seemingly unaware that his words were being broadcast across the sector. While bureaucrats debated ethics, we evolved the species. Those diplomats would have halted progress for political gain. Director Voss grabbed Rourke's arm, urgently attempting to silence him, but the CEO shook her off, his enhanced strength sending her stumbling back. You ordered the deaths of 5 Alliance officers to protect corporate profits, Kale stated, each word deliberate and clear. I protected the future of human evolution, Rourke shouted back. The Bare Hand Initiative creates perfect infiltrators, enhanced humans indistinguishable from the unmodified. Do you have any idea what military forces will pay for soldiers who can pass any enhancement screening? The confession, broadcast live to billions of viewers, hung in the air for a moment before the implications rippled through the crowd. Military officials in the corporate box began backing away from Rourke, their expressions shifting from interest to alarm. Director Voss barked orders into her communication device, and arena systems began shutting down, lights flickering, audio cutting in and out. But the resistance technicians had prepared for this, rerouting critical systems through backup channels, ensuring the broadcast continued uninterrupted. Security personnel had finally reached the arena floor, surrounding Cale with weapons drawn. He made no move to resist, having accomplished his primary objective, Rourke's public confession. In the diplomatic box, Alara stood, her formal authority commanding attention even amid the chaos. As representative of the Vortex Confederation, I invoke Section 12 of the Sector Accords. Her voice carried clearly despite the tumult. Magnus Rourke has confessed to ordering the destruction of a diplomatic vessel and developing prohibited genetic weapons. I demand his immediate detention by neutral authorities pending investigation. Military officials who moments earlier had been potential Omnicorps clients now found themselves legal witnesses to admitted crimes against galactic law. Several immediately backed Alara's demand, their own positions potentially compromised if they appeared to support Rourke after his confession. The security personnel surrounding Cale hesitated, caught between corporate loyalty and the rapidly shifting power dynamics. In that moment of uncertainty, new figures entered the arena floor, planetary enforcement officers in the distinctive gray uniforms of Azagon Prime's nominally independent security force. Magnus Rourke, their commander announced through an official broadcast channel. You are hereby detained pending investigation of crimes against galactic law. Omnicorps headquarters and facilities are sealed until further notice. The corporate box erupted in chaos as enforcement officers moved to secure Rourke. The CEO's enhanced physique tensed visibly, his augmented systems preparing for potential conflict. For a moment, it seemed he might resist, triggering a violent confrontation in front of billions of viewers. Then, with the calculated precision that had built his corporate empire, Rourke's demeanor shifted. The rage disappeared behind a mask of confident composure. This is a momentary misunderstanding, he announced, his voice once again perfectly modulated. Omnicorps complies with all relevant regulations and treaties. We welcome the opportunity to clarify our research programs for regulatory authorities, as enforcement officers escorted him from the corporate box. Rourke's gaze locked with Cale's across the distance. There was no longer any pretense of civility in those eyes, only cold, calculating hatred and a promise of consequences to come. The security personnel around Cale withdrew as planetary enforcement established control of the situation. Medical staff approached to check for injuries from the championship match, but Cale waved them off, his attention on Alara as she descended from the diplomatic box to the arena floor. It worked, he said simply when she reached him. Yes, she agreed, though not without complications to come. Rourke's public confession ensures investigation, but his resources remain vast. Corporate mechanisms will attempt to shield him from full accountability. Cale nodded, the reality of large-scale justice tempering his sense of accomplishment. But the bare hand initiative is exposed. The deployments will be stopped. And your squad's mission finally completed, Alara acknowledged. They carried warning of this threat. You ensured that warning was finally heard. Around them, the arena continued in controlled chaos as spectators were gradually evacuated and security protocols implemented. Media drones hovered at the perimeter, capturing footage of the unprecedented events unfolding at what should have been a simple sporting championship. What happens now? Kale asked, suddenly uncertain. For 5 years, vengeance had been his driving purpose. With Rourke exposed and facing justice, the future stretched before him unmarked and undefined. Oh, that, Alara said, her black eyes studying him with that familiar intensity, is the nature of the fifth challenge. Transformation requires not just completing a journey, but beginning a new one. Before Kale could respond, a small figure darted past security cordons and rushed toward them. It was Rin, her violet-tinged face alight with excitement and concern. You did it, she exclaimed, skidding to a stop before them. Everyone in the lower city is celebrating. They're saying Omnicore is finished. Kale managed a tired smile. Not finished, but definitely facing consequences. The corporations always escape real punishment, Rin said with the cynicism of a child who had grown up under corporate rule. But you showed everyone they're not invincible. That matters. Her simple assessment cut through the complexity of galactic politics and legal maneuvering to the heart of what had been accomplished. Not perfect justice, perhaps, but a meaningful step toward accountability. Yes, Kyle agreed, placing a hand on her shoulder. It matters. Rin beamed up at him. What will you do now? Will you stay and keep fighting in the tournaments? The question echoed his own uncertainty about the future. For the first time in 5 years, Kale had no clear mission, no driving purpose shaping his decisions. I don't know, he admitted. I haven't thought beyond today. A characteristic of profound transformation, Alara observed. The path forward reveals itself only when one is ready to walk it. As planetary enforcement officers approached to take their statements regarding the events, Kyle touched the wooden charm Rin had given him days earlier, a small token that had somehow accompanied him through the most significant moments of his 5-year quest. Whatever came next, whether justice for his squad was fully served or partially compromised by corporate power, he had honored their sacrifice by completing their mission. The warning they had died to deliver had finally reached its destination. Captain Lena Vasquez, Lieutenant Sam Rodriguez, Flight Officer Tara Chen, Technical Sergeant Mark Lee, Intelligence Officer David Park. Their names would be in the official record now. Their deaths acknowledged not as a tragic accident, but as deliberate silencing of diplomatic carriers. It wasn't the vengeance he had imagined for 5 years, but perhaps it was the justice they would have wanted. Systemic change rather than personal retribution. As he followed the enforcement officers toward the exit, Alara and Rin beside him, Kale felt something he hadn't experienced since before the crash that had claimed his squad. A sense of possibility unbound by grief and rage. The future, uncertain as it was, contained options beyond survival and revenge. The fifth challenge, transformation, had indeed emerged from the culmination of all that came before, whether he recognized it yet or not. Kale Mercer was no longer simply the survivor seeking vengeance, but something new and yet undefined. The alien woman who had seen him fighting barehanded and said, "I wish you were my husband," had, in her cryptic vortex way, offered him a path back to humanity when all he had sought was retribution. As they emerged from the arena into the artificial sunlight of Azagon Prime's upper levels, Kale looked up to see the actual stars visible beyond the atmospheric barrier, distant points of light representing countless worlds and possibilities. For the first time in 5 years, he allowed himself to wonder what might lie among them for a man who had completed one journey and stood at the threshold of another. 3 months after the championship finals and Magnus Rourke's public confession, Azagon Prime had changed in ways both profound and superficial. Omnicore's headquarters remained operational, but under new leadership and strict regulatory oversight. The Bare Hand Initiative had been officially disbanded, its research data secured by a coalition of governmental and independent organizations. Rourke himself remained in detention pending trial, though his extensive resources had succeeded in delaying proceedings through legal challenges and jurisdictional disputes. Corporate justice moved slowly, but the public nature of his confession made complete evasion of accountability unlikely, a rare outcome in the corporation-dominated sector. In the lower city, conditions had improved marginally as interim planetary authorities implemented reforms designed to address the most egregious inequalities. The resistance movement had transformed into a more public advocacy organization. With Tycho and Mara among its recognized leaders, Kale stood on the observation deck of the Vortex diplomatic vessel, watching as Azagon Prime grew smaller in the viewscreen. After providing testimony for various investigations and helping the Resistance transition to its new role, he had finally accepted Ilara's invitation to depart the industrial planet for new horizons. "Having second thoughts?" Ilara asked, joining him at the viewscreen. "No," Kyle replied truthfully, "on just acknowledging the end of a chapter." She studied him with those inscrutable black eyes that had once seemed so alien but now held a strange familiarity. "And the beginning of another." The diplomatic vessel would make several stops throughout the sector, supporting Vortex efforts to stabilize regions affected by Omnicore's operations. Kale's role as a cultural liaison was intentionally undefined, a position that allowed him to use his unique combination of military experience and personal knowledge of corporate exploitation in service of broader justice. "I still don't fully understand why you chose me," he admitted, a question that had lingered despite all they had experienced together. "Out of all the potential assets in the sector, why focus on one revenge-obsessed survivor?" Ilara considered her response carefully, as she did with all significant communications. "The Vortex observe patterns across longer timescales than most species comprehend," she finally said. "Individuals occasionally emerge whose personal trajectories intersect with larger currents of change. You were such a nexus point, though not for the reasons you believed. Not just for revenge against Rourke," Kale surmised. "Your quest for vengeance was merely the surface manifestation of a deeper pattern." Ilara confirmed. Beneath it lay a fundamental commitment to justice that survived 5 years of hardship without corruption. That quality is rare and valuable in times of transition. Kale absorbed this assessment, finding it both flattering and somewhat uncomfortable. For so long, he had defined himself by his survival and his quest for revenge. To be seen as something more, something potentially valuable beyond that narrow purpose, required its own kind of transformation. "When you said I wish you were my husband after that first fight," he said, changing the subject slightly, "you mentioned it had 2 meanings in Vortex culture. One about worthy adversaries. What was the other?" Something like amusement flickered in Ilara's expression. "In ancient Vortex traditions before our civilization achieved its current form, there was a belief that certain individuals across species shared complementary essence patterns, what you might call compatible souls. When such individuals encountered one another, their combined influence could affect probability currents beyond their immediate circumstances." "And you thought we had that?" Kyle asked, skeptical but curious. "I observed a possibility," Ilara corrected. "The challenges confirmed its reality." Before Kale could respond to this typically cryptic Vortex assessment, a communication chime sounded from the ship's systems. "Ambassador Ilara," a crew member's voice announced. "We are receiving a priority transmission from Vortex Central Coordination. New assignment parameters for our next destination." "Acknowledged," Ilara replied. "I will review them shortly." As the communication ended, she turned back to Kyle. "It seems the pattern continues to evolve." Kale touched the wooden charm from Rin, which still hung around his neck, a reminder of how unexpected connections could emerge from chance encounters. "Where are we headed now?" "That," Ilara said with the slight smile that had become more frequent in recent months, "is a question with multiple layers of meaning. In the immediate sense, we are being redirected to the Arcturus system, where corporate exploitation patterns similar to Azagon Prime have emerged. In the broader sense," she left the thought unfinished, but Kale understood her meaning. The journey ahead, both literal and figurative, contained possibilities neither of them could fully predict. The transformation that had begun in the fighting pits of Azagon Prime continued, revealing new aspects with each challenge faced and overcome. As the diplomatic vessel accelerated to faster-than-light speeds, the view screen shifted to display the swirling patterns of hyperspace. Kale watched the mesmerizing flow, no longer the revenge-driven survivor or even the champion fighter, but something new, a man finding purpose beyond personal justice, in the complex currents of a galaxy where bare-hand fighting against overwhelming odds sometimes meant confronting systems rather than individuals. Beside him, Ilara observed both the hyperspace patterns and her human companion with equal interest. The alien woman who had seen something in him beyond his quest for vengeance, and created the space for transformation through her cryptic challenges. Together, they watched the stars blur into streams of light, carrying them toward whatever awaited in the next chapter of their unlikely alliance. The end.